since we have the 2+2 dialogue coming up fairly soon, I'm sure that this issue will soon get behind us, because I do not believe it reflects a public desire by USA to show as a, and as you know, in India, a foreign hand is always viewed very suspiciously. So I don't think this is a US desire to show that, we are bullying or pushing India or trying to browbeat it in any way. So I think this will pass, but absolutely unacceptable. And I do believe that the Americans are a little embarrassed, as the first speaker said.
Yeah,
I think they've understood that this is unfortunate.
Okay,
but it's
very important point you're making, Ambassador. You're saying that you don't think it's reflective of the sentiment in the Biden administration. You're putting it down to possible inexperience by Deputy National Security Advisor Dalip Singh. If I could just get Aman Thakkar, also, you want to complete your point? Please.
Can I just clarify that?
Yeah, please.
Can I just clarify that?
Yeah.
What I meant was, I don't think that the Americans wanted it to come out in public. They would surely have liked to convey this to us in private.
Right.
Unfortunately, it has been done through a press meet, and that is not the best way to go ahead.
Oh, it's pushed. Okay, understood. It's pushed all the wrong buttons, and now, there's a lot of damage control to be done at a very sensitive time when, India's role is being looked at closely. Aman, how do you read what happened? And, what kind of firefighting will be necessary? Because, it's not something to be simply pushed, brushed under the carpet. The headlines have all been screaming, and they've pushed back aggressively against the words of the Deputy NSA.
Yeah, I think, as Craig and others have said so far, that the statements weren't helpful. I think in now dealing with India for about 20 years, U.S. policymakers on both sides should have recognized how statements like this can be interpreted, and how India would consume those kinds of statements. So I think that was not ideal for U.S. diplomacy. But I think these issues, as we've brought up, defense trade, energy trade, and the resultant impact on Indian national interest is something that will supersede, I think, the individual conversations and headlines that happen.
Yeah.
And as we look to the 2+2, as we look to continuing diplomatic engagements, I think the U.S. administration and India will continue to discuss ways in which they can align or come to some sort of common agreement. The United States isn't just dealing with, one country that has a deep trading relationship on energy with Russia. It's got to deal with European partners who are going to continue trading on oil. They see their energy security as being tied.
Exactly.
There have been statements by, the Norwegian leadership, by, other sort of Nordic countries that say that the war is not going to end just because we stop trading on oil. And so I think the United States will continue to engage diplomatically with India and with other European countries and find a common ground. And I think that will be the test of the enduring strategic partnership between these two countries, is the ongoing diplomacy and how we continue to get, Indian national interest and U.S. national interest, which may be a little bit apart as, we look at, a month or 2 months into this invasion coming, I think, closer and closer, not browbeating or bullying or, pointingly telling what another country's national interest is, but recognizing what the national interest is of another partner and coming to a joint agreement. And I think the Biden administration, the U.S. administration, and India are committed towards finding that common ground.
I want to, within just the context of what's happening between Russia and Ukraine, Craig, I want to pull you into this. What is that common ground? As far as oil, if we narrow it down to the comments of the Deputy NSA, it was about the payment mechanisms, it was about oil, it was about defense imports. My question is, India's pretty much made it clear that they're going ahead to and getting Russian oil. The defense imports are not going to stop. The rupee-ruble mechanisms are being worked out and possibly expanded as well. So what kind of common ground do you think actually exists and is going to be targeted as part of this US-India diplomatic engagement, Craig?
Well, I think there are, India certainly does import oil and energy from Russia. It's not exactly India's primary source of oil and energy, right? India depends mostly on oil from the Middle East, even more from the United States than from Russia. Russia constitutes a fairly small portion of Indian
Very
imports.
small percentage, yes.
So while it is an issue, it's not an overwhelming issue in the way that it is for many of America's allies in Europe. They're there, Russia is the key energy importer or source. And so while it is an issue, and I'm sure that it is of concern to some policymakers in DC, I don't think it's going to be a major obstacle for U.S.-India cooperation moving forward. The same, frankly, goes for defense exports. When Nuland was in India recently, she mentioned that just as the United States is looking to help Ukraine acquire sort of Russian-sourced spare parts, Russian-sourced systems that it's familiar with, that the U.S. might be interested in doing the same for India. In the same way, sourcing those supplies from partners in Europe who have stockpiles, who have their own production facilities. So there is, I think, an opportunity for the U.S. to assist India in ways that don't necessarily go against either country's national interests. And I also think that, frankly, the fact that India does have a relationship with Russia may be helpful down the line. We've seen the Indian government speak with the Russian government, with Ukraine.
Do not hide anything, and we appreciate that India is taking this situation in the entirety of facts, not just in a one-sided way. Indian foreign policy is characterized by independence and the concentration on real national legitimate interests. The same policy basis exists in the Russian Federation, and this makes us, as big countries, good friends and old partners, an important part of the international relations. We always respect each other's interests.
Day 37 of the war, Marina, and the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Russia is in India. High-level engagement, meets with the Indian Prime Minister as well. Is there, obviously Russia is also aware that, India has a relationship with the United States that is on an upswing. At a time when Russia, has been isolated by the world, is this a worry, India's relationship with the United States, in the context of Russia facing all these sanctions, and all this isolation from the rest of the world? Marina.
Well, of course, we are aware of India's relations with the United States and whatever, but here in Russia, we see India as our friend and partner who was, is, and will ever be. For your understanding, Russia is a long-standing and time-tested partner of India. Since the signing of a declaration on strategic partnership between India and Russia 22 years ago, relations between India and Russia have reached a qualitatively new level, characterized by the development of cooperation in almost all areas of bilateral relations, including politics, security, defense, trade, economics, science, technology, and culture. Strategic partnership is carried out by several institutional mechanisms of dialogue, both at the political and official levels, to ensure regular interaction and monitoring of cooperation activities. I remember that during the visit of Russian President to India in December, India and Russia was raised to a particular privileged strategic partnership. As for sanctions, financial system, of course, and to dilute the US dollar, what is our president doing now? He's diluting the US dollar dominance in it as radical restrictive measures imposed by Western countries after the launch of Russia's special operation in Ukraine. And it may contribute to the emergence of small currency blocks based on trade between certain groups of states.
I hear what you're saying, Marina. I want to bring Ambassador Malhotra in on a very specific issue, which is, you know, these expectations that are there, Ambassador, from India. In today's engagement between the Russian foreign minister with the Indian leadership, twice India has said, look, even though India has abstained, India has a neutral position as far as the war is concerned. They've said that, you know, we are not for military operations. The war must end. Hostilities must cease as quickly as possible. There needs to be diplomacy and dialogue. Do you see a role? I know it's difficult for individual nations, to have major roles. But do you see a role, sir, for India going forward in this war?
Well, we already have a role in the sense that if you see the level and the number of foreign dignitaries who are coming to India and wanting to catch our ear or share a assessment with us, we are already a player in this game. And I think we can exercise some influence both on Russia and on USA. The Russians also need us. They are our friends, but they also need us at this moment. Same with the Americans. I mean, when they look to later on to confront China, they cannot forget that without India on their side, it would be a little complicated and difficult for them to do that. So we are increasingly a player, and as our economy grows and we continue to prosper and move up the ladder, I think we will be even more so. And yes, maybe we are not looking to play a game where we serve as an intermediary or try and arrange proximity talks or anything like that, because that is going on side by side. Today, there would have been already a round of Ukraine-Russia talks. But what we're pointing out is it's time to stop hostilities. In all these cases, you have to bring hostilities to an end. And then you come to, safe passage for civilians, a ceasefire package, withdrawal of heavy artillery, exchange of prisoners, etc., and all of that starts. And then you look at what else needs to be done. And up here, if you see, both and all of that starts. And then you look at what else needs to be done. And up here, if you see, both needs to be done. And many countries in Europe are also going down that direction.
Absolutely.
You see, Switzerland has changed its position. Sweden and Finland have changed their positions.
Yeah.
So it might be time that we try as the situation on the ground sorts itself out from the view of the two countries involved.
By Moscow. S-300 is a long-range surface-to-air missile system. It was said to be a game-changer in Ukraine, but the footage paints a different picture. Video 2 reveals the Russian air power and its air superiority over Ukraine. Footage shows the crew of the Panzer anti-aircraft missile and cannon complex. Video shows Russia promptly detecting and destroying a Ukrainian unmanned aerial vehicle. Debris of the unmanned drone is then seized by the Russian forces. The third video shows a special military operation conducted by the Russian armed forces. Moscow is repeatedly striking the military infrastructure and equipment of Ukraine. Video 4, released by Kremlin, shows Ka-52 helicopters of the Russian aerospace forces destroying fortified strongholds and firing positions of armored vehicles of Ukraine. After 6 rounds of talks, there was hope that Russia would de-escalate. But Moscow continues to rain missiles on key Ukrainian cities. Bureau Report, India Today.
Polarization Nataka is becoming white hot a year before assembly elections in Karnataka. After hijab, it's halal and it's become white hot. Preeti gets you the big story and the big debate on the other side.
battery swapping was a real game changer and is a real game changer as we go into other markets, large-scale markets.
You are watching India Today.
After the hijab face-off, halal is raging in Karnataka. Fringe groups have demanded a halal ban in the state a year before the assembly elections, and political parties have dived into the fight. Take a look at this report. Karnataka, fringe groups have demanded a halal ban in the state a year before the assembly elections, and political parties have dived into the fight. Take a look at this report.
First, the hijab controversy. In the state. Fringe groups are calling for a ban on halal.
किसके ऊपर विश्वास है वो करने दो.
The opposition has blamed BJP for no action against the fringe groups.
BJP chief minister is responsible for all these things. Even on moral.
In the harmony of this state.
As the fringe shifts its focus on halal after hijab, will real issues for polls take a backseat over communal ones? Bureau Report, India Today.
Disastrous economic crisis in neighboring Sri Lanka. Preeti Chaudhary puts the spotlight and debates a country that is crippled. No foreign exchange, 14-hour power cuts on a daily basis, no fuel, no medicines, and an absolute crisis of an existence in Sri Lanka. That's next.
Union Minister Nitin Gadkari arrived at the parliament in his new car and all heads turned. The car's door boldly stated powered by hydrogen, and everyone wanted to know more about Gadkari's hydrogen car. He rolled into parliament in India's first hydrogen electric vehicle, the Toyota Mirai. It costs roughly 50 to 65 lakhs in the UK and could perhaps be more expensive in India. It is claimed that the Mirai can cover 600 kilometers on a full tank. It has a capacity of 5.65 kgs of hydrogen and can be refueled in an estimated 5 minutes. The car is powered by green hydrogen. Green hydrogen mainly refers to the process by which it is obtained. So, when water is split into hydrogen and oxygen using renewable electricity, green hydrogen is obtained. It has significantly lower carbon emissions as compared to normal grey hydrogen which is produced from fossil fuels.
हमें फ्यूल में भी आत्मनिर्भर होना होगा और इसलिए हाइड्रोजन के 3 प्रकार हैं। एक पानी से ऑक्सीजन हाइड्रोजन अलग करके जो हाइड्रोजन निकलेगा उससे गाड़ी चलेगी। इलेक्ट्रिक की कार का खर्चा 1 रुपए पर किलोमीटर है, इसका ज्यादा से 1.5 रुपए से 2 रुपए आएगा।
Green hydrogen cost is expected to be anywhere between $1.5 to $2 per kg, and that's roughly about 100 to 150 rupees. As is clear from the name, it is a vehicle powered by hydrogen. When hydrogen reacts with oxygen, energy is produced. The engine is powered by electricity while the water vapor is released. These are known as hydrogen-based fuel cell electric automobiles, meaning they're hydrogen-fueled electric cars equipped with a battery as well. Hydrogen cars are expected to bring down driving costs. Nitin Gadkari acknowledged India's fuel issues and mentioned green hydrogen is the solution to India's fuel problem. So what's your take on it? Petrol, diesel, electric or a hydrogen-based car? What would you prefer? She's the wife of Ukraine's President Zelensky, and she fears for the safety of her husband. In a written exchange from an undisclosed location with a media house, the 44-year-old revealed that she calls her husband every morning, but only after praying for his well-being. Meet Olena Zelenska, the First Lady of Ukraine. She is the wife of the Ukrainian president, and she has been standing like a strong pillar by his side during these shattering moments of the war. Olena was born in the same city where President Zelensky was raised. She and Zelensky were schoolmates, but they were not acquainted then. Zelensky once said that he knew many of her classmates, but not Zelenska herself. They got to know each other much later when Zelenska was studying at the Faculty of Civil Engineering at Kryvyi Rih National University. She reportedly had a boyfriend at the time and he was busy trying to make a career in comedy. It is said that it was comedy that united them. Olena was a scriptwriter and Zelensky is one of the founders at Kvartal 95. It is a leading provider of entertainment TV content in Ukraine. Later, Zelensky got her on board as the scriptwriter.
Zelenska was one of the writers of the show, Servant of the People. The relationship between the couple developed gradually. They dated for 8 years before getting married on 6th September 2003. On 15th July 2004, their daughter Alexandra was born. On 21st January 2013, Zelenska gave birth to their son. Zelenska became the first lady of Ukraine on 20th May 2019 with Volodymyr's elect. In an interview, she said, and I quote, "I am a non-public person. I prefer staying backstage. My husband is always on the forefront, while I feel more comfortable in the shade. I am not the life of the party, and I do not like to tell jokes." Olena has been a part of many social causes. Her first initiative talked about nutrition reform in Ukrainian schools. In December 2019, during a speech at the 3rd Ukrainian Women's Congress, Zelenska initiated Ukraine's accession to the G7 International Initiative on Gender Equality. She also started an initiative to spread the Ukrainian language in the world and the introduction of Ukrainian language audio guides in the most iconic the plight of women and children too. She is considered as one of Ukraine's most influential women.
The health insurance specialist, co-presented by JK Pancharghat Tire. Ab hawa nahi nikli.
Status report on vandalism outside Chief Minister Kejriwal's residence. Aam Aadmi Party called vandalism plot to kill the Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal. The Punjab Assembly passes resolution asking for Chandigarh to be given to the state. Haryana Chief Minister M.L. Khattar says the Union Territory is and will remain the capital of both states. Air travel all set to become costlier as jet fuel prices hiked by 2% to an all-time high. Petrol, diesel prices unchanged today. Setback for Gujarat government as Supreme Court asks Gujarat High Court to examine Mahatma's great-grandson's objections to the Sabarmati Ashram revamp plan. High Court had dismissed Tushar Gandhi's plea in November. Our neighbour Sri Lanka, viewers, is neck deep in a severe economic downturn. This meltdown since its independence in 1948, and things are not looking good at all. It's only getting worse. There is curfew in the capital Colombo after protests broke out, civil unrest, many say fueled by the opposition as well, but a strong sense of discontent on what the country is witnessing. Sri Lankan army has been deployed at every petrol station to help orderly distribution of fuel, while men and women wait in the longest of queues. Most of them fainting is what we're getting to know. Here's a report on the economic mess unfolding in the island nation.
Angry Sri Lankans took to the streets in the capital, Colombo, protesting against the soaring prices of essentials and shortages of everything from food to fuel. The protesters were tear-gassed and showered with water cannons. Across Sri Lanka, citizens are feeling the growing pain of the country's worst economic crisis in years.
I have to travel to work in Colombo. A litre of petrol that used to cost 120 rupees 3 months ago now costs 254. It is very difficult for us to manage as I need to always pump petrol to go to work.
In the past 3 months, fuel prices have increased 3 times, while essential food items have doubled. Sri Lankan police said the 2 men collapsed and died while waiting in separate queues to secure fuel amid the skyrocketing prices. For weeks, people have been queuing up at pumps, often for hours, and the country has been under rolling power cuts.
Yesterday, it was a 10-hour power cut. Today, they say it will be 13 hours. The fish and the meat in the fridge and the children's milk have gone bad. The child is crying, saying it is very hot. We ask the government.
With power cuts for up to 13 hours a day, as the government is unable to make payments for fuel imports because of a lack of foreign exchange.
Rehan Jayawikram, former mayor Weligama, joins us, as well as Indrajit Samarajiva. He is an author. Mr. Samarajiva, if I might start with you. You know, we connected earlier on over social media, and you actually told me you have to save on your battery pack to be able to make it to our show. How bad really is it? Because we are reading these horror stories where, you know, how bad really is it?
So I'll start by, excuse me, I'll start by saying that I'm one of the lucky ones. We're actually quite rich, so we can adapt around it. But a lot of people are really suffering. But for us, the impact is, I mean, as you can hear from my voice, I'm sick, I'm sleep deprived, my children didn't sleep well last night, but we have food on the table and we're able to get by. But a lot of people are really not doing very well at all. I would say my experience last night, we just had a power cut all night. And so the children don't sleep. And then my son wakes up and just screams at me. And then I told my son another time that, you know, the president's house has power. And then my son screamed at him. And I think that's the attitude everyone in this country has right now, young or old, because we're really suffering. And then we don't see our leaders being there with us. And we see them as, in fact, causing this problem.
Mr. Samarajiva, I want to ask you, you know, there is so much being said about, you know, the civil unrest. We can see it as we're speaking with you, on screen. How much is it actually organic, where there is this strong discontent, where now the first family of your country is concerned?
I would say it's very organic. I feel very angry. This affects everyone. This is not like a distant conflict, or it's not a distant problem. This affects everyone directly. Energy feeds into every part of our lives. We can't take our children to school. We can't keep food cold. We can't feed our children. We can't move. We can't run businesses. This affects every single person. There have been other problems which have affected certain communities or certainly poor people, but this is affecting everyone across all strata. Floors. So they can't turn away from this problem. Minorities and the poor have always been telling us that these problems have been happening, but this is a problem which affects everyone. And I'd say the tension is very strong in Sri Lanka right now. I'm very angry. Everyone I know is very angry. This is hurting us directly. Our children.
You're seeing on the streets, Indrajit?
So the president's house is a kilometer from mine. So just down the street in the other direction, people have been holding silent, peaceful protests, not silent, but peaceful protests for 31 days now. All the major political parties have come out. Like I said, this is affecting everyone. I would say that it's not like riots in the street. Sri Lanka is safe and we've been through problems before. But look, I think right now we're at the point where, you know, a single spark could turn into a flame. I do think that.
You know, Mr. Samarajiva, I know you're shocked.
So actually, I came to my mother-in-law's house where she has a generator. I've been avoiding this for a while, but we finally came in.
All right, I'm going to ask you one very quick question before I let you go. Do you see things getting worse, and how worse is it? Because, like I said, you know, we are reading these horror stories where surgery cannot take place in hospitals. Is that actually happening? Are you completely out of medicine? Is it actually happening on ground?
So I think at the University of Perideni, I think it was, yes, they did report that they were stopping surgeries, but your foreign minister was in the country at that time, and he actually helped intervene and get supplies for that, which we're very grateful for. Sri Lanka's hope is essentially that it rains, and it did rain today, because we have developed our own hydropower energy, and we're of course an ancient agricultural irrigation civilization, and we developed that. But the problem is now we're depending on oil imports for the rest of our power. But if it rains, then we do have some power from that. And then going forward, that is what we really have to focus on. We have to develop our own energy resources, our own production capabilities.
All right, but clearly you don't have any faith in your government right now, at least what we're witnessing and what you're
No, they got to go. I think if the government can't provide power, they don't get to be in power. Like, I'm sorry, that's just the basics.
Well, Indrajit Samarajiva, appreciate you joining us. I hope we don't have to connect with you in the next few days, and you do, and things actually turn for the better. I wish your son a good sleep this evening. I hope it rains. I hope it pours. Thank you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you to the people of India. You've actually been very supportive. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that comment. Thank you. I want to now cut across to Rehan Jayavikram. He's the former mayor of Welagama. He's also joining us. Mr. Jayavikram, you know, you do have political connections. We understand that. But as a, you know, what is it that you are actually witnessing right now on the streets of Sri Lanka? Because what we are seeing is highly disturbing.
I think it's astounding scenes, what we're all seeing. And first of all, thank you very much for inviting us to be a part of this show. You know, it's astounding what we're seeing on live television. There are organic protests which are not carried out by any political party. One such group infiltrated the president's residence yesterday, or the access road to his residence. They were treated rather cruelly. They were treated rather unfairly. There was a government orchestrated event, I would say, where one of the buses or one of the vehicles in the protest was set on fire. And that was blamed on the protesters as well. And there are certain videos that have come out which show, you know, certain misdeeds being done by certain government supporters. And it's come to a point where the people really can't take it anymore, because every single thing and every single, what would you say, essential in this country has gone up, starting from the milk powder, which has significantly increased. The gas, there's a severe gas shortage, and even if there is gas, it's almost double or triple the price. There's a severe shortage of diesel, petrol, and fuel in general. There's a massive shortage in kerosene oil, and it's just turning out to be a disaster.
Mr. Jayavikram, you know, it seems to be, with what you're facing right now, the biggest leveler, because even if you have the wealth or the money, the shortage is so acute that you cannot access basic necessities as well.
Absolutely. And the fact that as a main opposition, the fact that we have been telling the government for over a year to go to the IMF, because there have been case studies all over the world. Now, if you look at the situation in Lebanon, and when you look at what's happening in Sri Lanka, it's very much like a parallel to case studies. And the fact that the government refused to go to the IMF for over a period of 1 year, it's just shocking. And they just kept on printing money because of the president's lackluster attitude and the massive tax cuts that this government bought on its people. You know, he bought in tax cuts with the hope that, you know, this ruling party will be able to win elections, but that resulted in massive foreign debt and the fact that we can't service these loans, and we're almost heading into default.
For our viewers, as a common citizen, how did you see the trajectory of this downturn? Because, you know, with a lot of us, it's at least, we are your neighbor. It's hit us in the face where suddenly we see that your country has completely run out of fuel, completely there's a power crisis, it's all shut down. Can you give us a trajectory for a common citizen? Has it only amplified in the last few days, or was it slowly coming? The storm was building.
It definitely didn't amplify within the last few days. It's been coming for a year. And it's not just the main opposition, but various people, economists, even people like India, Samarajiva, whom you had on the show. All these guys have been telling the government for about a year or about a year and a half that we need to seriously think of restructuring our debt program and going to the IMF. And like I said, the government knew this was coming. And we are very grateful because there were two major problems that happened the other day. One was the serious lack of fuel, and I think your foreign minister visited the IOC, the Indian oil company fuel shed, one of the fuel sheds, and he promised some sort of relief. And when Peradeniya, the teaching hospital, ran out of essential medical items, where they basically put a halt to all surgeries that were not procedural surgeries, which included emergency procedures like people who are elected to get heart surgeries or liver transplants or kidney transplants and all these very important things. They had put a sudden stop, and not a single minister in this government came forward and spoke about this. And it was only the Indian foreign minister who issued a statement about it. So that just shows the severity of how one-sided and how blatantly this government.
Nation. Now, Colombo's debt repayment to Beijing amounted to nearly $2 billion. This is not all. China also accounts for a whopping 30% of Lanka's FDI. Chinese government has also invested developing special economic zones in the country. China gave $1.1 billion loan for giving Humban Tota on lease for 90 years. China, harboring engineering company, is also building Colombo Port City project. The capital of Colombo. One would think that despite so much of investment, why has China completely shied off helping their business partners, what they call it, at a time of acute crisis, acute need? Let's cut across to our guest this evening. I have Harsha De Silva. He is member of the Parliament, Sri Lanka. I have Skand Thayal, former diplomat. I have Anand Srinivasan, economist. I want to, with the permission of our other guests, I want to cut across to Mr. De Silva first. Mr. De Silva, a lot of talk. You come from the opposition party right now. There is a lot of talk, and it is being alleged that it is your party that is trying very hard to foment civil Your own Facebook page, where the SJB asked people to come out in large numbers, is quite shy of helping you out in this acute time of crisis, Mr. De Silva. It seems India country is doing a lot more.
Actually, they haven't pumped in so much money to relieve us of our debt. It has been India who's been helpful to us in this last
way of investment.
I cannot say China has last few weeks when we have fallen to these depths. They have said, look, we are not able to restructure our debt, but we will reschedule them in such a way that we will give you more money to pay back our loans, but we have to make sure that you pay our loans on time. So that's the reality here.
All right, Mr. De Silva.
Dharmatilaka is worried. The farmer from Polonnaruwa in north-central Sri Lanka says these officers from the Statistics Department are assessing how much of the harvest has been affected. One agriculture source told Al Jazeera yields have fallen by 40 to 50% because of the fertilizer ban. The president said the measure was aimed at making Sri Lankans healthier and switching to 100% organic agriculture. But it was removed 6 months later after widespread protests. Dharmatilaka says the idea was a good one, but the way it was quickly implemented was wrong. Farmers say they were not consulted about the move and are angry at a short and say if the government cannot address the current crisis, it must resign. Mina Fernandez, Al Jazeera, Colombo.
Well, then, other than its huge debt obligations, one of the
and tea production has dropped. Tea production has dropped by 50%, and therefore their foreign exchange, which would have come through tea exports, has vanished. And because they don't have foreign exchange, they have not been able to service their debt.
Sri Lanka, and I want to bring in and appreciate the patience, sir. Mr. Thayil, he's a former diplomat. You know, at this point of time where Sri Lanka is also admitting to a fact that India is doing a lot more than possibly, somebody like a China is. Should India see this as an opportunity to make those amends?
First, Sri Lanka is of difficulties people are facing. So whatever India can do, that is being done. And yes, it is, when we say neighborhood first policy, grievances against India. And it is for India, people of India, to be in countries and not really delving into that how they had behaved or what taken, which may not have been to our liking. So I think this is India's role. We are the biggest country in South Asia. And this is what is being done.
But Mr. Thayil, I want to ask you, the fact is, how worried should actually India be? Because the kind of investment one sees of China, in Sri Lanka is very worrying, for especially the proximity that Sri Lanka has with us. And this could very well, it's a time of acute crisis for Sri Lanka, and to talk about it in a very plain, simple terms, but it's also an opportunity for India to possibly,
own empathy. And China is more business-like. China, even BRI, when they talk about $50–40 billion or more, it is mostly investment. They do not give grant assistance so much. And perhaps the interest rate is lower than LIBOR. But it is all money which China will take back from that country, which Sri Lankans have seen in Hambantota. Own strength, and Sri Lankans should be mindful of that.
Right. All right, Mr. Srinivasan, I'll ask you one quick question before I move on, and appreciate both you gentlemen for joining us. How does Sri Lanka actually climb its way out of this debt mess?
What they need is, first they need an economist finance minister, not somebody from the family. The family obviously cannot be the Prime Minister, President and the Finance Minister. That's what it is today. And they need an economist. Like in 91 we brought in Dr. Singh. They need to bring an economist finance minister. They need to go to the IMF and they need to restructure their debt. It's not fair to blame China alone, because they have gone to the international markets and borrowed in the international market. $35 billion is floating debt on the market, of which $6.1 billion is due in the next 1 year. And that is the pressure point. So what they need to do is they need to default on their debt. They have to borrow some $10 billion from the IMF, take stringent corrections. That means devaluing the rupee further, the Sri Lankan rupee. The Sri Lankan rupee is now 297 to a dollar, maybe drop by another 25 to 30%, and go for a restructuring, because Sri Lanka does not have any major manufacturing. It does some garment export. It does not have a major manufacturing base, nor does it have great services exports like what India has in terms of IT. It is primarily dependent on tea and tourism. So they need to broad base their revenue stream, and they need to go to the IMF like yesterday, like the gentleman told you. And maybe India can also aid. If I were in government, I would have given, because $35 billion is not a lot of money for India. India has more than $500 billion in forex reserves, so India can bail out. And India should seize the opportunity to bail out Sri Lanka at this point of time.
All right, appreciate you both gentlemen for joining us. We're going to keep a keen eye. We're going to get boots on ground, get you the very latest reports filtering in from our neighbor island nation, Sri Lanka. Till then, prayers for the citizens who are actually dealing with a crippling economic downturn. Thank you all for joining us. I want to now cut across to the other big story that we've been tracking very closely right here on the network, and that is Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Russia continues to pound key Ukrainian cities. Days after announcing de-escalation from the capital city Kyiv, in visuals released by the Russian Ministry of Defense, the extent of war wrought and destruction is captured. Rained heavy Russian missiles. Take a look at this report.
Identify, track, demolish. 2 days after announcing de-escalation and claiming to have withdrawn troops from the capital city of Kyiv, Russia continues its onslaught. The 4 videos released by the Russian Ministry of Defense reveal the ferocity of the assault on Ukrainian forces. Video 1 shows the destroyed battery of Ukraine's S-300 anti-aircraft missile system. The entire site has been reduced to rubble. No signs of human life. Only war machines destroyed by Moscow. S-300 is a long-range surface-to-air missile system. It was said to be a game changer in Ukraine, but the footage paints a different picture. Video 2 reveals the Russian air power and its air superiority over Ukraine. Footage shows the crew of the Panzer anti-aircraft missile and cannon complex. Video shows Russia promptly detecting and destroying a Ukrainian unmanned aerial vehicle. Debris of the unmanned drone is then seized by the Russian forces. The third video shows a special military operation conducted by the Russian armed forces. Moscow is repeatedly striking the military infrastructure and equipment of Ukraine. Video 4, released by Kremlin, shows Ka-52 helicopters of the Russian aerospace forces destroying fortified strongholds and firing positions of armored vehicles of Ukraine. After 6 rounds of talks, there was hope that Russia would de-escalate. But Moscow continues to rain missiles on key Ukrainian cities. Bureau Report, India Today.
All right, with that, I'm going to go into a quick break. To stay with me on the other side is the inspiring story of Sufia Khan, who's created history. She's a good news story. Coming up next. Stay with me. Welcome back. You're watching News Today. Now, in view of the declining COVID-19 cases, Maharashtra and Delhi too has now decided to do away with the fine for not wearing masks at public places. However, the government's advised people to still wear masks as an advisory and follow COVID-appropriate behavior. Here's more.
Maharashtra has lifted mask mandates. Mask wearing is optional. No fines for not wearing masks. That is the order from the DDMA, the District Disaster Management Authority in Delhi. There is a growing opinion that rules around masks should be more nuanced. Rules should now be relaxed. Are masks a burden? Should masks be done away with completely, or should rules be regularized right now? Is it really preventing transmission at a time when there is little or almost no transmission? Is it serving any purpose when people are not even wearing it, or wearing it wrong all the time given the mask fatigue? Well, this is an opinion, albeit a controversial one.
When the transmission itself is low, what the mask would prevent? So we know that in India, where the number of COVID-19 cases, daily COVID-19 cases are 1 or 2 per million, the benefit of mask is really limited.
Talking about the large segment of the population who have no interest or knowledge of science, and for them, disappearance of a mask equals the end of the pandemic, unfortunately. And that's the way the common man is going to look at it. They're going to say, okay, the government has said, okay, no more masks, which means the risk is over. So that can translate into extraordinary levels of high-risk behavior.
Is it the time to do away with masks altogether? At least for the time being, and revise the guidelines when things change in terms of an increase in cases? The government of India says no. Some experts say rules can now be revised.
I reiterate that it is the time India should reconsider the mask-related guidelines. The individual who are fully vaccinated in the healthy age group, if they are in open space, or rather all population in the open outdoor space, may not need to wear mask at the current low rate of transmission. But if there's a setting where there's a high transmission going on, people need to wear masks.
Others say relaxing these rules may mislead.
When the pandemic is not over, it is not wise to throw away precautions. I see people declaring that the pandemic is over and we can all come out free.
Okay.
I wish I could do that as well, but that is not scientific.
There is also a growing chorus to let children not wear masks in schools.
Unpleasant and unhealthy for them to mask for 6 to 7 hours a day continuously. Mask mandates in India are not customized to age group or to local COVID transmission level, and this goes completely against global guidance.
Parents have also initiated a petition, unmask our kids and make masks optional in schools. Some countries like the UK, Spain, Denmark, Greece, the United States of America have relaxed these guidelines now, lifted mask mandates, but countries like Israel had to bring them back after cases increased. The World Health Organization is warning against lifting of mask mandates. In New Delhi, Sneha Mordani for India Today.
All right, time now for our good news story of the day. Sufia Khan, a woman from Delhi, has set the Guinness World Record by being the fastest to travel the Golden Quadrilateral in India, not in a car or a bike or even a bicycle, but on foot. Take a look at Sufia Khan's Run to Remember.
100 kilometers run in one day. 6,000 kilometers in 110 days. This is the extraordinary story of Sufia Khan, who has run over 15,000 kilometers till date. Sufia's Run for Hope campaign has won her several titles. Her big mission is to cover the entire world on feet.
2017 में मैंने रन शुरू किया और फिर वहीं से एक आइडिया मुझे आया कि क्यों ना कंट्री में रन किया जाए, सिटी टू सिटी, स्टेट टू स्टेट, और मैं पूरे इंडिया को एक्सप्लोर करना चाहती थी.
The ultra runner started her journey in 2017. She had a comfortable job at the Delhi airport, but the dream to do something extraordinary made her quit her job she had for 10 years. And it was time to follow her passion.
जैसे अपकमिंग जो मेरे प्रोजेक्ट्स हैं उसमें हम अभी एक रन करने वाले हैं सियाचिन टू कारगिल वॉर मेमोरियल। वो हम आर्मी को ट्रिब्यूट करने के लिए एक रन करना चाह रहे हैं। उसके बाद में अक्रॉस दुबई प्लान किया है इसी ईयर। तो ये सारी मैं समझती हूँ जितने भी एक्सपीडिशन है ये सारी प्रिपरेशन है अराउंड द वर्ल्ड के लिए।
Kashmir to Kanyakumari, Manali to Leh, Sufia has covered the most extreme routes. Sufia is an inspiration for people who want to chase their dreams. With inputs from Varun Sinha in Delhi, Bureau Report, India Today.
With that, viewers, it's a wrap on this edition of News Today. Have a fabulous weekend. We'll see you on Monday.
When you're on the set, it doesn't feel as if you're shooting for OTT or you're shooting for theaters. It feels like you're doing the same thing what you've been doing for all your life, you know. So nothing like that. But what was challenging was that the characters I got to play, they were challenging, and that's what I wanted to do in my career. It was a very conscious effort to challenge myself as an actor to do characters which are out of my comfort zone, and OTT platform has given me that opportunity. It's just the best thing that's happened to me, you know, because there's so much creativity in OTT platforms. There's so much of different kinds of stories being written, you know, and so you get an opportunity of playing characters which you would never get offered earlier. Bobby Deol was, I mean, that image of mine which I had to come out of and to get these kind of roles. I think slowly I've worked towards changing my image, where people now started believing that after seeing Love Hostel, that Bobby is open to doing different kind of roles, and Bobby wants to do different kinds of roles, and they're appreciating me as an actor. They've started believing in me. I feel that yes, Bobby can play different characters. You know? So that's something I was trying to do, and it's working. I'm moving on the right track. So hopefully, fingers crossed, I hope I keep getting good characters to play.
When it's the world's biggest news story, there's only one gold standard of journalism.
You are watching in
When it's the world's biggest news story, there's only one gold standard of journalism.
You are watching India Today.
A huge disastrous scene over here. This is a city absolutely dead.
The Ukrainian military truck that was destroyed by our artillery.
Windows broken, shards of glass everywhere. These are unreal times for people of Golgotha. You're seeing new bricks because they're rebuilding. That's how resilient this town has been of Golgotha. I'm atop a T-64 Russian tank, and they are now preparing to roll in to the border areas, the front line.
Presented by Green Lamb Laminates, Gustakhi Saaf. Co-powered by Apollo 24/7. Download now. In association with Hetic Fittings, make your furniture work beautifully. Ozone, ab chalegi finger ki. Trends, get them talking. Kotak Mahindra Mutual Fund.
Hello and welcome to an India Today special broadcast on day 37 of the Russia-Ukraine conflict. I'm Gaurav Sawant. On day 37, we get you the latest from Kyiv to Kharkiv, from Mariupol to the conflict-hit areas in Ukraine. We'll also get you the latest on high-octane diplomacy with the US, UK, Russia and China all trying to woo India closer to their camp and India's insistence on an independent foreign policy.
Biggest broadcast from the war front. Live and uncompromising reports from Ukraine. Team India Today with Ukraine Army snipers.
54 का है ये.
Wow. And range?
Длина какой стреляет? Сколько? Километр или больше? Километр. 1 kilometer.
Wow. They pushed Putin's men out of Kyiv.
Amid massive shelling and bombardment, now we found this tank, a Russian tank that was hit by the Ukrainian side.
Fearless reporting amidst the fire.
The Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov is on a two-day visit to India. He met Prime Minister Narendra Modi, had extensive interaction with the External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar, and this visit comes at a time when the United States, the United Kingdom and other North Atlantic Treaty Organization countries are very closely watching India's engagement with the West, while Lavrov talked about the historic special strategic ties between India and Russia and said Russia is open to any kind of business with India. The US is watching this trip very closely. The US is very apprehensive about rupee-ruble trade and has warned India against this. But the American language has been rather inconsiderate. We get you more on international diplomacy and India at the center of it for now.
As the Ukraine war rumbles destructively into its second month, one of Russia's oldest allies, India, has been a constant geopolitical spotlight. What role will India play? Can't India leverage its friendship with Russia to stop the war? Why is India going soft on Putin's invasion? Is India alleviating the impact of Western sanctions on Moscow? Has India aligned itself in a deeply polarized world since Putin's tanks rolled into Ukraine? If there's ever been a week that underscores India's primacy in the order of things, it is this one. 3 top politicians spanning the dramatic divide have descended at the same time in Delhi, each one amplifying an independent relationship but also pushing some sensitive buttons. It began with US Deputy National Security Advisor Dalip Singh, who made the seemingly callous, intemperate remark lecturing India on how Russia wouldn't step in if China escalated operations at the border. A remark that has been widely derided, including by India's former ambassador to the UN, who labelled it as coercion.
Mr. Dalip Singh has joined the ranks of Mr. Preet Bharara in terms of being one of those persons of Indian origin who takes a dig and successfully tries to rattle India at every opportunity. Who is USA to impose sanctions or consequences on other countries? That right, if at all it is a right, belongs to the United Nations.
The abrasive and much derided quip from Biden's man was clearly to try and attack India's relationship with Russia, underscored today by the arrival of Sergei Lavrov, Putin's very vocal foreign minister, and the man doing much of the talking over the Ukraine invasion.
Indian foreign policy is characterized by independence and the concentration on real national legitimate interests. The same policy basis exists in the Russian Federation, and this makes us, as big countries, good friends and old partners.
India's External Affairs Minister has previously also hit back at suggestions that India was making missteps by dealing with the belligerent sanctions-hit Russia over oil and gas post the invasion of Ukraine.
What we are seeking to do, whether it is in the context of India or other partners and allies around the world, is to do all we can to see to it that the international community is speaking in unison, speaking loudly against this unjustified, unprovoked, premeditated aggression, calling for an end to the violence.
India, as you are aware, has always been in favor of resolving differences and disputes through dialogue and diplomacy. In our meeting today, we will have an opportunity to discuss contemporary issues and concerns in some detail.
Another player arriving in India fresh from the smoking chessboard of Ukraine was UK's Foreign Secretary, who has voiced apprehensions about India's role but played safe.
We respect other countries' decisions about the issues that they face. India is a sovereign nation. I'm not going to tell India what to do.
The month gone by has also been riddled with condescending commentary from Western think tanks pronouncing India's abdication of strategic duty during the current war. Words that have been responded with contempt by Indian analysts. The truth is, India is a close friend of Russia and has a deepening relationship with the US too. So has the week gone by perhaps highlighted above all that India follows its own foreign policy path and won't be influenced. Bureau Report, India Today.
On day 37 of the conflict, the Ukrainian forces appear far more confident and in control of the situation. From Irpin to Bucha to Brody, the access to Kyiv The Ukrainian forces are now controlling the approach and are consolidating their position. I caught up with some of the scouts and snipers who were active in combat in the past 1 month. They are now fairly in control, and they say they are likely to be relocated to the east, where action appears to be intensifying. India Today's Lalit Mohan Joshi and I bring you this India Today exclusive from Kyiv. 37th day of the Russia-Ukraine war in the heart of Kyiv. Snipers, a team of snipers and soldiers enjoying, relaxing, having a cup of coffee, and this gives you an indication of the situation on ground. With us are some soldiers of the Ukraine army enjoying this cup of coffee. You're a sniper, but is there no tension right now in Kyiv of a Russian attack?
Так, мы гоним их отовсюду с Украины и вытесним из Крыма. Мы заберем все свои территории, потому что война у нас идет с ними 8 лет. 8.
बोले 8 साल से हमारी लड़ाई चल रही है, हर जगह से हम उनको भगा रहे हैं. बोला ऐसा भी वक्त आएगा कि क्रीमिया को भी हम लेंगे, वहां से भी इनको भगाएंगे, हर जगह.
लेकिन अभी यहाँ कीव में टेंशन नहीं है.
Киев русским никогда не взять. Никогда.
रशियन लोग कीव को कभी भी नहीं ले पाएंगे, कभी भी नहीं.
And if you look around, while there are a lot of soldiers here, but life also appears to be coming back to normal. There are a lot more vehicles on the road. Some shops are also opening. It is an indication that on day 37 and the smiles on their faces, you are smiling. That's an indication that they're on top of the situation.
потому что все любят, мы не боимся, правильно, да? Так, мы не боимся, наши военные украинские спалили им тысячи танков, машин.
जलाए हैं, इनकी गाड़ियां जला दी हैं बेतैर जो होती हैं, और इनके सारे लोगों को यहाँ से भगा दी गया. हम बिल्कुल नहीं डरते हैं. फौज हमारी बहुत बड़ी और बहुत बढ़िया फौज है, हर आदमी लड़ने को तैयार है.
And you're a sniper, 7.62, the range is 1 kilometer.
Выполняем любые задачи, мы все мобильные, мы не только снайпера, а мы мобильные ребята, можем...
सिर्फ हम स्नाइपर्स नहीं हैं, हम बिल्कुल पेट्रोलिंग कर रहे हैं, हर जगह पर जहाँ पे भी कुछ होगा हम लोग वहाँ पर पहुँचेंगे और वहीं पे मारेंगे.
So if you just look, can we just show your weapon? This is the sniper rifle. It's an old Soviet era rifle. 7.62 mm is the cartridge. The range is almost a kilometer. And the soldiers say, the soldiers of the Ukraine army, if you look at the insignia, this is the sniper unit which is deployed on ground. But right now, they say they're extremely confident because they've had success in neutralizing the threat, not just here in Kyiv, but also on the outskirts of Kyiv. Now they are relaxing. They're out for a cup of coffee because reinforcements have come in, additional weapons and systems have come in, and the Russian forces have withdrawn from around Kyiv and are said to be moving towards Belarus. Ukrainian forces are now digging in for better protection in the days and weeks ahead. With cameraman Lalit Mohan Joshi in Kyiv, Ukraine, Gaurav Sawant for India Today. There is relative peace in Kyiv. There are more vehicles on the streets. Some shops have opened. People have come out of their homes. Russia has indicated that it will de-escalate as a confidence-building measure and not target Kyiv and Chernihiv. But Ukraine's President Zelensky sees this as the lull before the storm. The forces are on high alert, and there is an apprehension that in the days and weeks ahead, if these talks do not succeed, then Russia will target not just other parts of Ukraine, but also the capital, Kyiv.
Ukraine is bracing for new attacks from Russia, with leader Volodymyr Zelensky warning late Thursday of battles ahead. He said the situation in the south and southwestern Donbas region remained extremely difficult, and also said again that Russia was building up forces near the besieged port city of Mariupol.
Also in the Donbas, in Mariupol, in the Kharkiv direction, the Russian troops are accumulating the potential for strikes, powerful strikes. We will defend ourselves. We will do everything we can to stop the occupiers and cleanse our land of their evil and senseless chimeras.
And in a rare sign of internal dissent, Zelensky also announced he was firing 2 generals on the grounds they were traitors.
Those high-ranking servicemen who have been prevented from deciding where their homeland is, who break the military oath of allegiance to the Ukrainian people for the protection of our state, its freedom and independence, will inevitably be deprived of high military ranks.
Earlier on Thursday, a Russian missile strike in the Ukrainian city of Kharkiv hit gas pipes, cutting off supplies to tens of thousands of people there. Kharkiv, the country's second largest city, has suffered some of the heaviest shelling since Russia invaded Ukraine more than a month ago. Zelensky, however, said his forces had pushed back the Russian military from the capital Kiev and the nearby city of Chernihiv. At talks this week, Moscow said it would reduce offensives in both cities as a goodwill gesture and focus on what it called liberating Donbass. After weeks of constant shelling, the city of Mariupol has no running water, gas, or electricity, another obstacle for those who remain as they fight to survive. A spokesperson for Mariupol's mayor said on Monday nearly 5,000 people had already been killed. Ukrainian authorities were hoping to evacuate more residents from Mariupol after Russia agreed to open a humanitarian corridor on Friday. But several previous deals have collapsed. Russia says it is carrying out a special operation to disarm and denazify its neighbor, but it denies Kiev's accusations that they are targeting civilians. Western countries say Putin's real aim was to topple Ukraine's government. Peace negotiations are set to resume by video conference on Friday.
As a confidence-building measure, Russia may have announced de-escalation in the targeting of Kyiv and Chernihiv. But other parts of Ukraine continue to be in the line of Russian missile and rocket fire. In fact, the Ministry of Defense in Russia has released images of specific targeting of military installations and strategic targets in other parts of Ukraine. We bring you this special report.
Identify, track, demolish. 2 days after announcing de-escalation and claiming to have withdrawn troops from the capital city of Kyiv, Russia continues its onslaught. The 4 videos released by the Russian Ministry of Defense reveal the ferocity of the assault on Ukrainian forces. Video 1 shows the destroyed battery of Ukraine's S-300 anti-aircraft missile system. The entire site has been reduced to rubble. No signs of human life. Only war machines destroyed by Moscow. S-300 is a long-range surface-to-air missile system. It was said to be a game changer in Ukraine, but the footage paints a different picture. Video 2 reveals the Russian air power and its air superiority over Ukraine. Footage shows the crew of the Panzer anti-aircraft missile and cannon complex. Video shows Russia promptly detecting and destroying a Ukrainian unmanned aerial vehicle. Debris of the unmanned drone is then seized by the Russian forces. The third video shows a special military operation conducted by the Russian armed forces. Moscow is repeatedly striking the military infrastructure and equipment of Ukraine. Video 4, released by Kremlin, shows Ka-52 helicopters of the Russian aerospace forces destroying fortified strongholds and firing positions of armored vehicles of Ukraine. After 6 rounds of talks, there was hope that Russia would de-escalate. But Moscow continues to rain missiles on key Ukrainian cities. Bureau Report, India Today. Bureau Report, India Today.
On India Today, we bring you all sides of the story. India Today's Foreign Affairs editor Geeta Mohan flew to Moscow and from there to Mariupol. Donetsk and Luhansk, both well and truly in Russian control, while the Ukrainian forces have launched a multiple series of attacks to regain some of the lost territory. Russian forces are now in Mariupol, and Geeta Mohan traveled to Mariupol to bring us this report.
We are on our way to Mariupol again because there's fresh development. Mariupol, most of Mariupol at a strategic level is under the control of Russian forces, but battle is ongoing at a tactical level. So we will have to go and see how things are panning out for the forces on both sides. But important over here is to note the announcement by the Foreign Ministry of Russia that they have agreed to a humanitarian corridor for civilians, not just on this side where we were reporting from, for civilians to come out of Mariupol into Donetsk, but also from Mariupol into Zaporizhia, which is on the other side. So we'll go and see and assess the situation on the ground. Things are difficult, life is difficult. Alex with me, Maurizio, an Italian journalist, also with us. We have Satya and we have Ruslan, who primarily will be driving us around. Right now, Alex is doing that for us. But Alex, in terms of the situation on the ground, humanitarian corridor, but even in Donetsk right now, because of the water plants that were hit by Russian forces, it seems like we're going to face a lot of water problems.
The water plant was hit by Ukrainians, and they did it by their plan. They need to close water for the region here to make problems. That's their tactics, as we see. About humanitarian corridor, we're gonna see it maybe in Mariupol today.
Do you have water in where you live?
No, my flat now is out of water, and we wait water in 2 weeks when the repairing will be finished.
So we're not out of water in our hotel, but we're out of heating. So for people like us who come from India, it is cold. But the heating, like Alex says, was announced earlier because in this part of the world, they normally stop heating the places by April, by March, April.
So middle of April.
Mid-April. But this time they'd already announced because of the situation that they're going to stop heating a little earlier. That's in the first week of April, which is why most probably the heating has stopped. But if water plants are affected, all the heating, even if you have gas, all the heating happens with water in the homes, in hotels. And that's why if water plants are affected, even if they wanted to give us heating, they really cannot. So that's a problem that we're facing now.
Let me now get you the latest from the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. Ukrainian forces claim that the Russian forces that had occupied the Chernobyl nuclear power plant have now vacated the area. There are reports that seem to suggest that some of the Russian soldiers who were in control of Chernobyl were impacted adversely by high degree of radiation from the contaminated site. Some soldiers were unwell. They were rushed out in an ambulance, and there could be an adverse impact on others who took them to Belarus. While the veracity of this report hasn't been independently verified, we bring you more details as given by the Ukrainian forces.
All Russian forces that had occupied the Chernobyl nuclear power station have pulled back from the plant. That's according to Ukraine's state nuclear company, Energoatom, which on Thursday suggested that concerns over radiation had driven the Russians away. The explosion of one of Chernobyl's nuclear reactors in 1986 was the worst nuclear accident in history, contaminating swaths of the surrounding area with deadly radiation. Energoatom also said on Thursday that it had confirmed information that Russian troops had dug fortifications, including trenches, in the so-called Red Forest, the most radioactively contaminated part of the zone around Chernobyl. In a statement, the power company said, quote, almost a riot began to brew among the soldiers due to fears of radiation. Ukraine has repeatedly expressed safety concerns about Chernobyl and demanded the withdrawal of Russian troops, whose presence prevented the rotation of the plant's personnel for a time. Russia's defense ministry did not respond to requests for comments on the Chernobyl statements. The UN nuclear watchdog said on Thursday it is preparing to send a mission to the radioactive waste facilities at Chernobyl after Ukraine informed it that most Russian troops controlling the site had pulled out. The IAEA said it has not been able to confirm reports of Russian forces receiving high doses of radiation while stationed in the Chernobyl exclusion zone.
There is a major security overhaul almost across Europe. One thing is clear, Europe has changed perhaps forever. Several countries are evaluating their security afresh. Military spending is set to go up in several countries, including in the North Atlantic Treaty Organization countries, and they are carrying out a very major, perhaps one of the biggest military exercises to see how they all fare together against Russia. While Ukraine has been left to fend for itself, of course they're getting military supplies and defensive weapons from NATO countries, but the NATO alliance is looking at its security afresh.
In the far north of Norway, it is forever winter. This is exercise Cold Response, several weeks of military games involving 30,000 troops from 27 countries, most of them NATO alliance members. These troops are from Finland, a country with a long shared border with Russia. Finland's not a NATO country and it's historically neutral. But since the invasion of Ukraine, an increasing number of Finns and neighbouring Swedes want their nations to join the NATO alliance.
It's worrying the soldiers, the civilians, and it's not nice. It's something we speak about often, and everyone in here just wants peace, not a war.
But these soldiers are reluctant to discuss what abandoning neutrality might actually mean.
I think that is a political question, and maybe I won't answer to that one.
While a real war rages in Eastern Europe, these troops from Finland and other countries are being put through their paces in the harshest of possible climates, in the hope that these skills will never have to be used for real.
This is an operating theatre room.
We're shown around a state-of-the-art field hospital that can be erected in a matter of hours. Precisely the kind of equipment Ukrainian forces desperately need, but can't get their hands on. And elsewhere, this Norwegian-made anti-aircraft weapon, the only one in the world. NATO countries have spent billions of dollars arming Ukraine, but supplies have to be carefully calibrated. Do too much and risk being drawn into a direct conflict with Russia. The invasion of Ukraine poses the biggest threat to European security in a generation. Several NATO states are now rushing to ramp up their defence spending, and the UK and Norway announced a new agreement on defending the increasingly strategic Arctic. As the West weans itself off Russian energy supplies, it's looking to Norway to make up for shortfalls of oil and gas. The Arctic Sea also has rich fishing grounds and future trade routes.
We have to be in a position to uphold our rules and our international law, such as freedom of navigation. Should the ice melt even further, and the countries like China will seek to use maybe these routes to sail through, and Russia might...
Massive show of force aimed squarely at Moscow. 220 aircraft, 50 warships, tens of thousands of troops. Putin's actions in Ukraine have rejuvenated old alliances and expanded NATO's reach and appeal. Precisely the opposite of what the Kremlin wants. Niamh Barker, Al Jazeera in northern Norway.
Is this the lull before the storm in Kiev? There are no air raid sirens, no aircraft, no incoming missiles. But the apprehension is if peace talks do not succeed, then the worst is yet to come. We will continue to track developments on the story very closely, but that is all I have for you on this special broadcast. Many thanks for watching.
What is there outside of Earth? Space, infinite space. And did you know the race to conquer space has been man's never-ending struggle? Of strategic and political significance, the conquest of space generated intense competition between the US and the Soviet Union during the Cold War. In 1957, the Soviets were first to place a satellite, Sputnik, into orbit. A few weeks later, a dog became the first living creature in space. Laika unfortunately didn't survive the journey. In 1961, Soviet astronaut Yuri Gagarin became the first human to orbit the Earth. In 1963, his compatriot Valentina Tereshkova became the first woman in space. In 1969, the Apollo 11 mission made it possible for Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin to walk on the moon. In the 1970s, competition gave way to US-Soviet cooperation. Apollo and Soyuz capsules docked in orbit. In those days, man was also dreaming of Mars. In 1976, US probes Viking 1 and 2 landed on the Red Planet. The following year, space probes Voyager 1 and 2 lifted off on their mission to explore the solar system. In 1981, the era of reusable spacecraft began. This period was marked by disasters for Challenger in 1986 and Columbia in 2003. The Hubble telescope was launched in 1990. The construction of the International Space Station began 400 kilometers above the Earth, making long stays in space possible. In 2001, space was no longer the preserve of defense and science. The first tourist in space, American Dennis Tito, relaxed in the ISS. Since the start of the century, new private companies have shaken up the space industry. SpaceX and Blue Origin are developing reusable spacecraft to return to the moon and one day Mars.
You are watching.
By eBix Cash. हर खुशी के लिए काफी है. Co-presented by CoinDCX, your gateway to crypto. Co-powered by Green Lamb Laminates, Gustakhi Saaf.
Hello and welcome to the Business Today show. I'm Udayan Mukherjee. My guest today on the show has worn so many entrepreneurial hats over his career. First, as the promoter of a really successful entertainment company, and then a producer of some of the edgiest and most successful movies in Bollywood, and more recently as one of the significant investors in a very edgy edtech company called Upgrad. Gives me great pleasure to welcome on the show the one and only Ronnie Screwvala. Ronnie, great to see you again, and thanks for joining in today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on the show. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, as I was introducing you, you've done so many things. I mean, in a 30, 40-year span. Tell me, do you have to do a mental reset every time you get into a different game, or do the basic rules of entrepreneurship and risk-taking apply to pretty much each of them?
I think the basic rules do apply very clearly. They get mature. Your gut gets a little bit more refined. Learning always helps. But there isn't a playbook. I see a lot of young people today talking about and using the word playbook in a very, very loose manner. And I think what I would like to say is there isn't a templated playbook. It's different things for different, it's just not for different sectors, just different way you approach things. Sometimes in a day, sometimes in a week, sometimes in a problem, sometimes in a sector, sometimes in consumers.
How have you matured, Ronnie, over time? Do you see yourself individually having changed during the course of the journey? Would you say you were probably more impetuous or hot-headed or impulsive even maybe 20 years ago than you are today?
I think I was more opportunistic 30 years ago then opportunistic as a word converts itself maybe into sizing up opportunities, which actually means that you're using a little bit more thoughtfulness to that. You look at more things like focus. You look at things of a little bit more long term. When you're opportunistic, you look at things in a much more short term manner. When you look at opportunities, I think you look at it in a much more longer term manner. I think over a period of time, maturity doesn't come in just the way you handle people, handle situations, handle business, handle scale. I think it also talks about the value systems of what one goes through, why you do what you do, what turns you on, what's the long-term impact of what you want to do. So I think it's that mix and match that really takes your career path as you go forward. So one thing I'd like to say, because I think in your starting part you said, I see myself completely as a first-generation entrepreneur. I see myself as a doer. So I've never looked at myself with an investor hat on. Yes, media was my initial one, serendipitously. It's not like if somebody told me that I'm going to be an entrepreneur and I picked media as a career path. I just used to do as a hobby theater. I used to do front of camera hosting on, at that time, the only state-run Doordarshan channel. And serendipitously, that became something that I built as a career over 20 years. Today, when I look at the same thing and rebooting myself in education, and I'm not an investor in Umbrella, it's pretty much what I did when I co-founded UTV as a media company. That same DNA comes in. You've got to roll back up your sleeves. And if you think any sense of entitlement that what was there, I've already been there, done that, so why do I have to do all this again? That's going to be a bit of a letdown, because it is about rejigging, rebooting, restarting, relearning in many, many ways. And the third one, which for me is also a very special place in my heart, is our Swadesh Foundation, where I think it's matured me a lot, because when you look at things in a non-for-profit environment like we do with Swadesh Foundation, it kind of gives you a very holistic picture of how businesses could be built and need to be built.
It's interesting. You said two things here, Ronnie. You said that you don't look at things in an opportunistic way, as you may have in an earlier time, and you consider yourself an entrepreneur, not an investor, which brings me to the question of whether in today's avatar of Ronnie Screwvala, would you still have sold UTV and walked away, or do you sometimes regret that decision?
No, I don't regret that decision, and I would have done that because, firstly, I don't think any of us have choices in life that if you can look at this 10 years later and redecide, I don't think life gives you that luxury. But even if it does, I would say no, because my thought process and decision-making to do what I did in 2012 doesn't change. And even if it looks better or worse in 2022, at that time in 2012, it was the right thing to do.
In each thing that you've done over the years, whether it's movies or whether it's UTV or with Upgrad today, the one thing which leaps out is that you've got a risk-taker's mindset. Would you say that's a fair assessment, that at heart you're a risk-taker and you don't mind accepting failure if the risk does not pay off? Because it's something which a lot of Indian entrepreneurs are quite shy of. Indians are not really risk-prone people generally.
Yeah, the word risk, it just sounds very maverick and it just sounds a little bit more brash. So I'd like to put that into context. I think you did put that into context by using the other word, which is failure. So if the question is, am I a risk taker because I'm not scared of failure? Yes, I think I'm a risk taker. Over a period of time, I think your gut improves and your ability to size up what risks you're taking are important. Risks are about batting outside the wicket. Risks are about taking that last plunge and working hard to make it happen. Risk is not when you every time bet your enterprise, bet your family, bet your company, bet this. So just to be clear, risk is not binary. Risk is to be viewed in a very different manner. It's a decision-making process that's more at risk than the financial risk. That's the outcome of it.
Do you see greater risk appetite among the new generation today, Ronnie? Because, we've got a rash of unicorns which have been created over the last couple of years. And the kind of young entrepreneurs who are leading this, would you say that their mindset is quite different from the kind of entrepreneurs who are your peers who started the game maybe 30 years ago?
That's a very good question. And I'd like to say it in two ways. first, I think, no, I took a lot more risks when I didn't have any resources, didn't have a bank to give me a loan or private equity or angel capital to come our way. That was a different kind of a risk taking because it's all in. You're all in, you don't have a choice, and then you stay all in. And that actually is very strong. Now, cut to today, you're only reflecting risk with people who have got well funded, so to speak, or funded. But there's a lot of people who are actually all in. So to me, I break this up into the people who are all in are taking more risks than the people who just feel, oh, I got the money, I raised my money, so I can take more chances and risks. That's how I'd like to differentiate it, because that's when we really set the signal. I think that the message today for entrepreneurs is not about the 20 people who raised a certain amount of money, and that's a different story, but it's just how all in are you, you know? And there I would say 30 years back, I was all in. What I'm doing today, I'm all in. Does everyone who's raised money from outside look at this? I think it's a mixed bag there, because it's about, okay, firstly, it's like, if I hadn't raised the money, I may not have even gotten into that business, which means you're not all in. The second one is, the conversation is about the next fundraise. And therefore, I question that ability, because of course that means you're into your business and you want to grow, but you're almost betting yourself on a binary outcome. And fundraising gives you this context that you think you can take higher risks, but if the outcomes are always binary, that if I don't raise the next round of funding, I'm shutting down, then I think you're a less risk taker and a foolish risk taker than many others who require a lot more credit for the risk they take.
So which of the two categories that you just outlined do you think the current crop of digital billionaires belong to? Do you question their ability to have sustainable business models in the absence of private equity capital? Do you think many of them are destined for failure?
If I had a gathering on a round table of the 30 or 40 alleged or nomenclature word of digital billionaires, I will say let's talk in 3 years, because the ground will shift, the ground will change substantially. Just because you raise money at a certain valuation does not necessarily mean that's sustainable. I think at least 60 to 70% of the people who've done that are going to have a big challenge as they go forward over the next 3 years to establish and justify those values. Don't forget, as a founder, you give almost what we call lick pref, right? A liquidation preference, which means that every stage when you pumped up the value, and pumped I'm using as a loose word, but pumped up the value, if you can't justify that at the end game, you could land up being from even a 20% investor to being a 2% shareholder in your company. So I think that the ground is going to move a lot. So I would not shake hands and hug today's digital billionaires, so to speak, and say you're going to be around for the next 3 to 4 years or 5 years. I'd rather take that call 5 years from now.
You know, it's interesting to say this, Ronnie, because
I know it sounds cryptic, but that's what I feel.
No, it's not cryptic at all. I'm completely in sync with what you're saying. In fact, I was just going to tell you that I heard a similar strain from, coincidentally, an ed tech player, Baiju Ravindran, a few months ago on this very show. He said there are companies in the digital space who don't have cash flows but are building great valuations, and there are companies in the edtech space who have cash flows and profits to show off today, not 5 years out. Would you say that that is the kind of model which appeals to you in the upgrade investment that you've made, that the cash flows don't come 5 years later after you've burnt hundreds of crores? They are available even today.
So if it's specifically about education in the edtech sector around the world, I would like to say very clearly, it doesn't need that kind of money. This is not one of those sectors where the more money you have, the more you can burn and do whatever else. Yes, sometimes it goes into consolidation. Most times in education, marketing necessarily doesn't work. So the model has to be right from day one. The people who say, I'm going to do X, Y, Z, and then 5 years later, I'm going to figure out profitability, it's a very tough place to be, almost an impossible place to be. And half, I would blame the entrepreneurs, but more than that, the half, I blame the investors. Because the chant, when you're putting in that money is, okay, so what will it take to do this? What will it take to do that? It's not a game show. What will it take to that? There are no theoretical questions and answers, but it almost becomes like that. Okay, instead of $100 million, if I give $200 million, what will it take to do that. And then similarly, just 9 months later, magically, those same people will say, okay, where's the profitability? So I think founders have to be rock sturdy that if they're only going to be lured into the valuation of the fundraising game without actually getting to what is the business I'm going to do, everyone else will be seen as fair weather friends getting on and off the boat. And I think when you look at failure there, most people think, oh, so what is the failure? You raised money and you got $1 billion valuation. Are you likely to fail? Failure has got multiples. The business may still continue. Could you be devalued? Yes. Is valuation going to be a failure if it's a lower part? Is the business model a failure? Is running out of money the failure? So there's that. You have to be very, very clear because you've upped the ante, you've upped the stakes. Now it's your responsibility, whether you're 30, 40, or 50 years age, to deal with that onerous part that comes with raising that kind of capital.
Given what you just said about EdTech, what do you think has the greater potential in this country, EdTech or FinTech? Because these two seem to be very broad categories where a lot of new enterprises are mushrooming. Some will survive, some will not. But broadly as themes, which do you think has greater potential?
See, I think it again depends on the benchmark. Both as total addressable markets are massive. I mean, a country like India, where we need to upskill so many people, where everyone who comes into the workforce is not ready for the workforce, where almost only 60% of the people don't even finish their undergraduation, but now need to, where a lot of people need to move from the arbitrage economy to what I would call the fourth industrial revolution or the IP economy, and learn to earn more. There's massive scope. The fintech is for a growing nation like this, we're going to transact digitally. So if you're crazy about the context of GMV and value and transaction value, then fintech will have its own. When it's really high impact and how a nation can actually become the second largest economy in the world, I think EdTech is going to play a much more role. And the last thing I would say is the wallet share, the mind share for spending of the consumer for education versus looking at fintech as an enabler. Here, it is going to be a much more, you'll pay for it, and you will pay for it because it's going to change your career and it's going to give you an ROI. In the fintech, you will use that more as a platform or as a transactional mode, which makes it more efficient. And therefore, finding that profitability in that sliver of a margin will have its own challenges.
We need to take a quick break at this point, but we shall return with Ronnie Screwvala in just a minute.
Watching India Today.
Welcome back. You've been watching the Business Today show. I've been in conversation with Ronnie Screwvala. You made the distinction earlier in the show about being an entrepreneur versus an investor. How would you qualify your investment or engagement in Lenskart? Would you say that you're an entrepreneur looking at Lenskart, or you spotted a big market opportunity which you invested in with an entrepreneur of your choice?
Lenskart is purely an investment from where I sit. It's really backing an entrepreneur. So to me, the DNA is if I'm a co-founder and if I'm a co-founder, then I'm deeply involved with the company. I'm deeply curious and engaged with the founder of Lenskart. But there it would be, I may have 5 points of view and it's up to him to take one or none of the ideas. When I'm looking at the company as an executive chairman, I don't have the choice that says, I have 5 ideas, let's see if my team likes some of them. So it's a different sense of driving, and Lenskart is an investment.
Tell us about the movies bit. We've spoken a bit about EdTech and Lenskart and even UTV. But, you know, RSVP, you keep saying it's a hobby of yours, but I can't help thinking that a very large part of your creative heart lies in that venture. Is there any financial motive at all in that, or does it exist only to satisfy some creative urges in you?
So now it definitely is only and solely as a hobby and a passion. It does not have any financial. I don't want to go out there and raise any money on it. And that's because personally, I feel doing repeat acts in life are very tricky and difficult. And I wouldn't want to do that. Second, I think having done that in media, and when you look at it as a business, almost 80% of what you decide is something that you have to do and 20% you want to do. The difference today in my being able to pick and tell the stories I want to tell is if I don't have a P&L accountability or having raised anyone's funding, everything that I greenlight is something that I want to do, not have to do. And that's quite liberating. Then it becomes a hobby. Then it becomes a very different sense of how you do that. So I want to treasure that moment of being able to want to do everything and not necessarily have to do it. And that's my clean-cut differentiator when it comes to storytelling. In terms of my creative buzz, yeah, I think it's unfinished business. I think at heart, I really enjoy that element of storytelling.
Just coming back to EdTech for a minute, while the sector has done incredibly well, there is also some chatter in the ecosystem about how some things are not going very well. Like, you know, you hear about lots of complaints. Some people say online education is not quite delivering what it started out meaning to deliver. There's some talk about organizations folding up, etc. Do you think the ecosystem is really healthy, or maybe there are things which could change for the better?
When you're market making and creating something out of nothing, there'll always be some side reactions, I would say, and under no circumstances am I justifying them. Education is something where nobody has looked at to have a market. It's always been you have a brand and then you go to that. As a college has been there, or a university for 50 years. But for most people, education has been an event. It's scheduled. It's school and then it's college. Now, so there's two different parts. One, in the K-12 sector, it's very difficult to measure outcomes. It's soft. It's parents, their FOMO, their ability to say, am I giving my kids the best? So between the time you invest in something, and there may or may not be an outcome because it's difficult you may think the marketing approach is very different. When it comes to higher education, outcomes can be defined very sharply. Because if you put in to learn something, it needs to augment your career. You need to get a promotion, you need to get a shift of a job, you need to do that. Otherwise, so I think those fundamentals have been established. Second, overall education in universities has always been a very selective medium. Online is a much more eliminated medium. If there are 10,000 people who apply for a college, they'll select 200. In online, if 10,000 people apply, 9,000 will be given the opportunity, 1,000 will be told differently. So the expectations at scale are something that people will need to align themselves to. I would not make that into a panic mode, but sure, if somebody is being aggressively marketing and overselling something, that doesn't do the industry well at all, because the first thing you need to do is be conservative in your approach. Now, if there are 100 startups in any sector and 2 fold up, I think that is something that would be much more founder-driven or company-driven or model-driven than labeling a sector. Because I think in almost any and every sector, there'll always be some people that have started up something and it didn't work out, mostly because the model wasn't right in the first place or they ran out of funding.
A lot of young entrepreneurs find it quite difficult to deal with their first failures, Ronnie. Take us through your journey. I mean, which instances of where you might have started something and it didn't quite work out that way, and how important is it in the life of an entrepreneur to be able to accept and to deal with failure?
You know, I think when we ask ourselves how important it is, almost like it sounds like we have a choice. I mean, there's no question about the fact that you're going to fail multiple times. Do I have recollections that are cathartic in the way when one failed, one felt this was the end of the world? Yeah, I think there would be. And with every failure, you've kind of digest that a little bit more. But I think that's where a little bit of the earlier point that I make is how all in are you? The problem of failure today is twofold. One is everyone is so fearful of the failure that 9 out of 10 times they're not even walking past the gate. The second one is when you're so fearful of failure and you let that comatose you, then it really is the first time it's going to be a failure. So I think while people are very, very scared about saying, I might fail, there's a lot of pressure that goes with there also, right? There's a performance pressure. Your parents have told you, why don't you go get a job? And now you've stepped out in your career, or there's a different crossroad. It's not just always about raising funding. There's an incredible amount of media and social and perception pressure that did you raise the right kind of funding because somebody else is doing that. So this constant pressure of performance in itself puts so much at stress in terms of failure, because otherwise your failures will be there. You did something wrong. But today the high profileness is what I think people are more concerned about than the actual part. It's no longer something that you can keep within and look at that. If I started something in a manufacturing operation, didn't work, it wouldn't be breaking news anywhere else. Today, people raise money, they get a headline, then they fold up, then they get a headline, and therefore it's a very, very public failure. And I think that's more spooky for a lot of people, but they don't have a choice, because if you stepped up and you're doing the PR and you want to be high profile, your ups will be high profile and your downs will be 3x more high profile.
That really does sound scary. But you've had a long career, Ronnie. Who are the people or peers, I should ask, who you have or hold in great regard or respect? And who are the business people you really admire in India?
You know, not to sound facetious, I think for me it's not been any individual. And the reason I say that today is because, I think everyone is not who they seem to be. If somebody says, oh, I'm looking at you, Ronnie, and I follow you, and I'm saying, look, you don't know everything about me. You can't take one facet and two facets and then say, I want to emulate yourself around myself. So I've been always a little cautious about this context, because everyone has got a different facets to them. So I would say different facets for different people in many ways. I think the Parsi community and some of the leaders we've had there, where you kind of look at, it's been inspirational for me, where you look at impact and you look at, the right value systems along with creating businesses at scale and being highly successful is one. The second one is where there's absolute raw ambition, where you will tear through everything else for market, for really being highly successful and creating that. And I think sometimes that stirs you up. Is that the best thing in isolation? No, but it stirs you up. So I think I'm a chapters guy. I'm not a whole book guy. I like to look at different facets of people and gleam on them to see what works for me. Because any one person to idealize today in the 21st century, I think is a little tricky and tough. Because what you see is not what you get, not because the other person is not that. It's because everyone is multifaceted.
Okay, you've provided me the perfect last question then. Give me a chapter that nobody knows in your book. I mean, what's the one thing that you would say nobody knows about Ronnie Screwvala?
I think there'd be a lot that they wouldn't. But I think people, I'm very reclusive by nature. I'm extremely reclusive by nature. I can be extremely thoughtful sometimes, though everyone may feel I'm being impetuous. And I actually do enjoy and thrive on the multiple impacts that one is creating. So I think for me, a lot of people look at that and look at time management, and that everyone feels, for example, that you need to be super busy. And I think that's not the case. I think I enjoy different facets of life. So I guess that's what it would be. Not the most exciting last answer.
No, but it's been an exciting conversation, which I've enjoyed a lot, Ronnie, and I thank you very much for it. Great luck for the future, and thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Amid the Russia-Ukraine crisis, Europe saw the world's biggest rise in arms imports in the past 5 years, a trend set to accelerate following recent rearmament commitments. How are arms traded across the world, and what is this industry's worth? International trade in conventional weapons is worth an estimated 100 billion USD annually. The industry's products range from light weapons to warships and military defense systems. Nearly 40% of arms exports originate in the United States, but Russia, France, China and Germany are also major suppliers. Europe shows the strongest growth in trade, 19%, a trend that should consolidate with the new Russian threats. Widely accessible weapons cause suffering and destruction. A global treaty aimed at reducing the irresponsible transfer of conventional weapons came into force in December 2014. Its strict criteria controlling sales aims to ensure participating countries avoid breaking international embargoes and reduce the number of weapons used for genocide, war crimes, or terrorism. Many of the 130 signatory countries, including the US, have still not ratified the arms trade treaty, while Russia and China have not even signed it. The International Committee of the Red Cross says there is still a discrepancy between political commitments and the ease with which arms are transferred to actors who do not respect international law.
Presented by Ebix Cash. हर खुशी के लिए काफी है. Co-presented by CoinDCX, your gateway to crypto. Co-powered by Green Lamb Laminates, Gustakhi Saaf.
A huge disastrous scene over here. This is a city absolutely dead.
The Ukrainian military truck that was destroyed by our artillery.
Windows broken, shards of glass everywhere. These are unreal times for people of Golgotha. You're seeing new bricks because they're rebuilding. That's how resilient this town has been of Golgotha. I'm atop a T-64 Russian tank, and they are now preparing to roll in to the border areas, the front line.
You are watching India Today.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Pooja Shali. This is a special telecast about our neighboring nation, Sri Lanka, facing one of its worst economic crises since independence in 1948. And I want to go directly to the visuals of what is unfolding in the island nation. Take a look at this. There is anger against the president. The protests have reached the president's door of the country. Lankans are on a war path. Widespread agitations of citizens across the country. Why? There is fuel crisis. Electricity cuts going into 10 to 15 hours long. It's a nation power outage, which in turn means industries and institutions are suffering, specifically health and hospitality. And then in the dock are the ministers in the government, 4 of them holding most important portfolios, and that of the Rajapakshas. I'm going to take you through exactly what has happened in Sri Lanka and what possibly is the impact for India on that. Massive fuel crisis, in turn also massive protests. Facing this economic meltdown since independence in 1948, things are not looking good for Sri Lanka. The Sri Lankan army also has now been deployed at every petrol station to help specifically distribute fuel, while men and women are waiting in long queues for hours to buy kerosene and other fuels. Here's a report first on this economic crisis unfolding in the island nation. Take a look.
Angry Sri Lankans took to the streets in the capital, Colombo, protesting against the soaring prices of essentials and shortages of everything from food to fuel. The protesters were tear-gassed and showered with water cannons. Across Sri Lanka, citizens are feeling the growing pain of the country's worst economic crisis in years.
I have to travel to work in Colombo. A litre of petrol that used to cost 120 rupees 3 months ago now costs 254. It is very difficult for us to manage, as I need to always pump petrol to go to work.
In the past 3 months, fuel prices have increased 3 times, while essential food items have doubled. Sri Lankan police said the 2 men collapsed and died while waiting in separate queues to secure fuel amid the skyrocketing prices. For weeks, people have been queuing up at pumps, often for hours, and the country has been under rolling power cuts.
Yesterday, it was a 10-hour power cut. Today, they say it will be 13 hours. The fish and the meat in the fridge and the children's milk have gone bad. The child is crying, saying it is very hot. We ask the government to give us some sort of a break.
The island nation of 22 million is struggling with power cuts for up to 13 hours a day, as the government is unable to make payments for fuel imports because of a lack of foreign exchange.
With the power cuts, there is nothing we can do. Our sausages will go bad. This is usually the time we get business. But when there are 13-hour power cuts, we can't do our business. The meat is kept in deep freezers. But to sell them, we must have the meat in display cabinets.
Historically weak government finances, badly timed tax cuts, and the COVID-19 pandemic, which pummeled the tourism industry and foreign remittances, have wreaked havoc on the Sri Lankan economy.
At this rate, not only me, but most Sri Lankans will have to starve and die of starvation. Even if you have money, there are no goods to buy. And there are things to buy, but there is no money. There are queues for fuel, milk powder and gas.
The rapid drain of Sri Lanka's dollars has left it struggling to pay for critical imports, as currency reserves have slumped 70% in the last 2 years to $2.31 billion. However, Sri Lanka has to repay about $4 billion in debt in the rest of this year, including a $1 billion international sovereign bond that matures in July. Deprived of basic amenities, Sri Lankans are raging. Massive demonstrations against the government's handling of the crisis were witnessed across the capital. Cops clashed with hundreds of protesters in Colombo after vandalism and arson by the protesters. Agitators set ablaze a bus in the capital city, forcing cops to resort to water cannon and tear gas.
People are not even eating 2 of the 3 meals a day. They just eat 1 meal. We don't know when these problems will end. Don't know at which point the country will take to the streets and rebel.
President Gotabaya Rajapaksa has chalked out a plan to work with IMF to end the crisis.
Yesterday's discussions with the International Monetary Fund was also held for this purpose. Through those discussions, we hope to find a way to pay off our annual loan installments, sovereign bonds, and so on. Subsequent to my discussions with the International Monetary Fund, I have decided to work with them after examining the advantages and disadvantages.
The Indian Ocean Island nation is battling a foreign exchange crisis that forced the devaluation of its currency and hit payments for essential imports such as food, medicine, and fuel. Bureau Report, India Today.
So as protests are now erupting in Sri Lanka, in fact, across the country, what went wrong? Now, one of the reasons, according to reports coming in, is the mismanaged government finances and therefore question directly on the government, including ill-timed tax cuts that were announced by the government. Huge piles of foreign debt. This is very important because this now brings in China as well, that has given massive loans to Sri Lanka. Also, there has been a shortage of fuel supply for at least a month now. There is, importantly, a fall in the foreign currency reserves by a whopping 70%, which means also in turn a devaluation of the Sri Lankan currency. And then came the COVID pandemic, a series of lockdowns impacting the island nation's tourism sector, which did provide massive revenue to the country, and therefore leading to no funds to even pay for essential imports, and that including food items and medicines for Sri Lanka. Now let me tell you what is the repercussion of what unfolded in the past few weeks. 10-hour-long electricity cuts are currently being reported across the country. Nationwide, petrol price has gone up by 92%. Diesel price has gone up by 76%. And that's not it. Gas cylinder price has jumped from a whopping 1,200 to 4,200 Sri Lankan rupee. Just take a look at this massive jump. In turn, because of electricity cuts, examinations have been cancelled for students. Printing industry has suffered. Routine surgeries have also been postponed, and that means healthcare sector has taken a massive hit. Staples rationed are now only available there across the markets. People are being told to curtail as much as possible. This is definitely a crisis there across Sri Lanka. Let's now quickly go across to Colombo. I'm joined live by Ambika Satkunanthan, former Commissioner of the Human Rights Commission, joining us from Sri Lanka. First, I understand, Ambika, there are massive cuts in the country. I'll not keep you long. What is currently the ground status there in your country? What is unfolding? Please do tell us.
Well, what is unfolding is some of it that you have mentioned, which is the economic crisis and the impact of that generally on people, but particularly people like daily wage earners and people who have already poor, marginalized communities like that have been the hardest hit. So therefore, there is a lot of discontent. And I think for the first time in my living memory, there are spontaneous protests of citizens. One of that is what you saw yesterday, which resulted in violence, and it resulted in 45 persons being arrested, including journalists who were arrested. And also they allege, and we have also seen photographs of them having been assaulted by the police. Now, this is something that is, as I said, something quite unprecedented in the terms of that it is spontaneous, that it seems large scale, that it is happening all over the country. Even today, we saw in the south of the country, fishermen were protesting, just close to Colombo, carpenters were protesting. So, and there is a large citizens' protest expecting to happen on Sunday. Therefore, I think what we have here, as you also pointed out, is mismanagement. It is, there is a crisis of governance, and particularly a government that has refused to take advice, that has refused to be transparent, refused to be held accountable. And I think the first time I have seen that Sri Lankan citizens, having realized what their duty as citizens is, are getting onto the street and protesting, demanding accountability and demanding that their rights and, most importantly, their basic needs are met.
Ambika, I do want to ask you here that, you know, if I'm correct, all of this actually started from the end of February, from mid-February. It's been more than a month now. It's gone completely out of control. Do you see the situation do you see a resolution, a solution coming in from Sri Lanka at this point? Because the focus will now be on the Rajapakshas. At least 4 of them are holding important portfolios in the government. What do you think is going to happen in the next few days for your country?
See, I don't think it's correct to say that it started a month ago. As I said, this is crisis of governance. And this, for instance, the lack of renewable energy, that is a problem that we have faced for years. And there have also been interest groups that have prevented us from beginning initiatives on renewable energy. So some of these problems have existed, many of these problems existed for a long time, but because we have a particularly incompetent government now that also refuses to take advice and do what is practical, that we have seen it unravel this quickly. And of course, as you do what is practical, that we have seen it unravel this quickly. And of course, as you also mentioned, COVID had an impact in making it unravel quickly. In terms of solutions, yes, they have said that they are going.
Yes. So then one quick question, Ambika, because we are looking at it from the outside.
Wage earners, large number of Sri Lankans work in the informal sector, right? And so they do need help. In terms of politics and change of government, we have very few.
All I will say, Ambika, at this point, because I understand the situation is still developing, that we wish you well and your country well. India and Sri Lanka have always had friendly relations, and I hope that the government will be able to help as much as possible. But wishing all the very best to all the Sri Lankans out there. Ambika Satkunanthan, thank you so much for giving your time and speaking to India Today. Now, remember, at this point, like I mentioned, the focus will be on the Rajapakshas and why. Take a look of how it does matter to the government and the people in the country of Sri Lanka. It's all in the family, as it is being said. Gotabaya Rajapaksa is the president. Mahinda Rajapaksa is the prime minister. Basil Rajapaksa is the finance minister, the most important right now portfolio for the country. Chamal Rajapaksa is the irrigation minister. That's not all. Namal Rajapaksa is the sports minister of Sri Lanka, while Shashendra Rajapaksa is the state minister. 6 from the family are currently holding big portfolios, and therefore perhaps a lot of criticism coming in for the family there holding fort in Sri Lanka. Now, importantly, it is to understand why this is not just about Sri Lanka. This is also about neighboring nations of India and also of China. Primal, take a look of what we have prepared and why India needs to watch this very carefully. It is dragon in the Sri Lankan waters. Take a look of how we have prepared these reports coming in. China is building a port city in Sri Lanka. It is important because these imports that are coming in with regard to exemptions that have now been granted by China only perhaps to buy time. But the Hambantota port has been already taken on a 99-year lease by China. This is very important. $1.1 billion loan in exchange for that lease. What does that mean? 2006 to 2009, China invested at least $12 billion. It's already been investing a lot in infrastructure in China. Not the best news for India to watch out for. Special economic zones, oil refineries, all of this is being developed by China. And therefore, how can then India, which is already and always had a friendly relationship with Sri Lanka, how is India also lending a hand at this point? Take a look of how India has offered help. Remember, External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar offered help to a Lankan hospital that had tweeted that their surgeries had been postponed. Immediately, the minister offered help. That's not all. A revised credit line has also been given to import essential items, including food and fuel. Going across, also now extending a 400 million currency swap, only perhaps to provide a temporary relief for Sri Lanka before it can bounce back. But apart from that, $900 million loan was given by India in January 2022. Even throughout, from February and March, what happened? 40,000 metric tons of fuel has been delivered in February 22, and more has also now been offered by the Indian government. But India will, interestingly, be also investing. There are going to be hybrid power projects. There is going to be the third energy project that India is investing in. And important, therefore, very important, because this is also about how China is trying to gain control into Sri Lanka. I'm now joined live. This is very important because this is a developing story. All reactions are coming in first on India Today. Erin Vikramathne, Member of the Parliament in Sri Lanka. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us at this time. What is currently the government's plan for Sri Lanka, for what is unfolding? Because we see protests and agitations on the ground, sir.
Thank you for inviting me. I am not sure that the government has a plan. We have been, as an opposition, saying this for more than a year because the government has not been pursuing the correct economic policy, and they have also been mismanaging. We don't see any change in that. So when you ask me what's the government's plan, I would say that they have no plan and it's not apparent.
Why do you say that, sir? Why do you say that at this point the government doesn't appear to have any plan of action?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't, because the situation we face is basically rooted in the macroeconomy. Sri Lanka is a twin deficit country. It has a budget deficit and a balance of payments deficit. And, they didn't address this. When the present president was running for office, he went around saying, taxes, and without any scientific study, they basically cut the taxes and the country's revenue fell by about 1 state it has gone up. So it's not COVID related, it's purely wrong policy, right? No fiscal consolidation, and it's also basically very poor management. The government has been very adamant and denying responsibility. But this government and this president is responsible for the mess we have got into. This is an unprecedented economic crisis. We have never seen this in our lifetime. And people are spontaneously coming onto the streets because there is no gas for cooking, there is no electricity, there is no milk powder for children. And the homes are having a huge issue, businesses are having a huge issue because production is affected. So you name it. There's a huge problem.
All I can hope right now, Erin Vikramathne, that there will be some solution that can come in for Sri Lankans, and it looks terrible to see how people are agitating, forced to agitate, of course, at this point. I want to thank you, sir, for your time, and I will connect shortly again and see how the story is developing. We'll be getting all the latest here on India Today.
You are watching India Today.
But love will make you do crazy things.
The couple first met in 1994 when 19-year-old Jada was auditioning to be Will's girlfriend for Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. But the makers of the show didn't find Jada fit for the role. Despite not playing opposite each other on the show, Jada and Will's relationship blossomed into friendship. Will, who liked Jada, was married to Sherry, but in 1995, Will and Sherry got divorced. Later in 1995, Jada and Will started seeing each other. Ever since then, Jada and Will have been open about their relationship to the world. Jada is an American actress who is best known for her roles in A Different World, Matrix and Gotham. Jada launched her musical career in 2002 when she helped launch a metal band, Wicked Wisdom. In 2021, Times named Jada as one of their 100 most influential people. Jada is also co-founder of Hey Humans Official and a talk show called The Red Table. She started seeing Will back in 1995 and she publicly accepted that Will approached her before her first marriage ended. In 2018, Jada publicly announced her alopecia diagnosis. She has been quite vocal about her conditions and the challenges that come with the disease.
You are what?
Отойдите!
A huge
The Ukrainian military truck that was destroyed by our artillery.
Windows, broken, shards of glass everywhere. These are unreal times for people of Golgotha. You see new bricks because they're rebuilding. That's how resilient this town has been of Golgotha.
I'm atop a T-64 Russian tank and they are now preparing to roll in to the border areas, the front line.
When it's the world's biggest news story, there's only one gold standard of journalism. When it's the world's biggest news story, there's only one gold standard of journalism.
You are watching India Today. You are watching India Today.
Отойдите!
A huge disastrous scene over here. This is a city absolutely dead.
The Ukrainian military truck that was destroyed by our artillery.
Windows, broken, shards of glass everywhere. These are unreal times for people of Golgotha. You see new bricks because they're rebuilding. That's
Son Ye-jin's character plays fake fiancé of the North Korean captain to survive in the enemy nation. Little did they know that they will stand together at the altar and exchange marital vows. But how did the Bin-jin couple find love? The star couple first shared screen in 2017 in the film The Negotiation, but love didn't bloom just then. They became friends and were seen together a few times. Later in 2019-20, they shot for the hit drama. Fans were already wishing and shipping the couple together. The prayers were heard and their relationship was confirmed in 2021. Hyunbin and Son Ye-jin's agency shared the pictures of the gorgeous groom and bride, leaving their fans in awe. Bureau Report, India Today.
Tom Cruise is the biggest newsmaker this week, courtesy the new trailer of his much-anticipated film, Top Gun Maverick. It's also good news for Game of Thrones fans, as the release date of its prequel has been announced. Let's fly 7 seas across to Hollywood and check out the top trending news in our popular segment, Fully Foreign.
A rift between Maverick and Lieutenant Bradley Rooster Bradshaw.
I'm going to send you up against the best. Yes, sir. You two characters are going to Top Gun. I feel the need for speed.
A pilot trainee and son of Maverick's late best friend, Nick Goose Bradshaw, who holds Maverick responsible for his father's death.
I don't like you because you're unsafe. That's right. I am dangerous.
Wild card. Flies by the seat of his pants.
I guess when I see something, I go right after it.
It takes a lot more than just fancy flying.
Directed by Joseph Kosinski, the film also features Miles Teller, Val Kilmer and Jennifer Connelly, among others. After several delays due to the pandemic, Top Gun Maverick is now all set to release in theaters on May 27, 2022. Gear up for Game of Thrones prequel House of Dragon, as it's all set to release on August 21st, 2022.
Dreams didn't make us kings.
House of Dragon takes place 200 years before the events of Game of Thrones, a medieval fantasy series that became a global phenomenon.
Gods. Kings.
The 10-episodic series will be based on George R.R. Martin's book, Fire and Blood. The series stars Paddy Considine as King Viserys Targaryen, Matt Smith as Prince Daemon Targaryen, Olivia Cook as Alicent Hightower, Emma Darkey as Princess Rhaenyra Targaryen, and Steve Trezon as Laura Carlos Valoran, among others. Bruce Willis will retire from his acting career after being diagnosed with aphasia, a condition affecting an individual's ability to speak and effectively communicate. His wife, Emma Hemming Willis, took to social media to share the news. Bruce Willis, who rose to fame in the 1980s comedy drama series Moonlighting before he became the tough New York cop in Die Hard franchise, also garnered critical acclaim for his roles in Pulp Fiction and The Sixth Sense. He was last seen in film A Day to Die, which was released on March 4th, 2022. Entertainment Bureau, India Today.
Shah Rukh Khan leaked pictures from the sets of Pathan in Spain came as a treat for his fans, while Salman Khan spent some quality time with his family this week. It's time to check out what is keeping our celebrities busy. Here it's trending.
Shah Rukh Khan and Deepika Padukone wrapped up the shoot of Pathan. The final leg of the film was shot in Spain, and what came as a treat for SRK fans are these leaked pictures of the superstar. That's not all. While making his way back to India, his pictures from Dubai airport also went viral on social media.
हमारे देश में हम नाम रखते हैं अपने धर्म या जाति से, पर उसके पास इनमें से कुछ नहीं था।
यहाँ तक कि उसके पास कोई नाम रखने वाला भी नहीं था। अगर कुछ था तो बस यही एक देश, इंडिया।
तो उसने अपने देश को ही अपना धर्म मान लिया और देश की रक्षा को ही अपना कर्म।
Earlier, Shah Rukh and the makers of Pathan had shared this announcement video of the film, which also featured Deepika Padukone and John Abraham. Directed by Siddharth Anand, Pathan is all set to hit theatres on January 25th, 2023.
इसके लिए थोड़ा सा इंतजार कीजिए। जल्दी मिलते हैं पठान से।
Salman Khan recently enjoyed some quality time with his family, and his video from his nephew Ahil's intimate birthday bash is a proof of that. The entire Khandan celebrated Ahil's birthday in what seemed to be a lavish affair with stunt performers and a huge play area for children. On work front, Salman recently wrapped up the shoot of his debut South film, Godfather, which stars Chiranjeevi in the main lead. This behind-the-scenes video from the film's set was shared by filmmaker Mohan Raja. Salman Khan will also be seen reprising his role in the third installment of his spy thriller Tiger, alongside Katrina Kaif.
Ready? Tiger always ready.
That's not all. It is also being reported that Shah Rukh Khan will be shooting for his much-anticipated cameo in Salman Khan's Tiger 3 in June. Katrina Kaif and Vicky Kaushal are vacationing together at an undisclosed location. The actress took to social media to share a couple of pictures from their getaway. In the pictures, the much-in-love couple can be seen soaking up the sun while chilling on a yacht. This is the first time since their marriage in December that Katrina has shared her holiday picture, also featuring Vicky Kaushal.
Your turn.
On work front, Katrina has a couple of projects lined up, including Salman Khan's spy thriller Tiger 3.
Ready?
Tiger always ready.
She also has Sri Ram Raghavan's Merry Christmas alongside Vijay Sethupathi and Phone Booth in her kitty.
Right. I'm a star right, gotta bark right. I induce pain, I am Luke Kane, makes a Bruce Wayne. I'm a Dark Knight, what you Stargate.
Husband and actor Vicky Kaushal, on the other hand, will be seen in director Lakshman Utekar's yet-to-be-titled film with Sara Ali Khan, and Meghna Gulzar's Sam Bahadur alongside Sania Malhotra and Fatima Sana Sheikh.
कई नामों से पुकारे गए, एक नाम से हमारे हुए।
The fourth edition of Cosmopolitan India Blogger Awards took place in the national capital to honor online excellence, and it was a thumping success. My colleague Chetty Narula with more on this.
Ekta Dikshit, Tarini Peshavaria, Masoom Minawar, Vitamins 3, Akash Ranisan, Aman Bhatia and Coco Baluchi, Prableen Kaur Bomra, Ankush Bahuguna. These were some of the top winners at the 4th edition of Cosmopolitan India Blogger Awards 2021. Sure that the bloggers you see on social media are recognized for being influencers. An idea ahead of its time, back when Nandini Phalla, the editor of Cosmopolitan India, conceptualized these awards.
And when you conceptualized these awards back in the day, you were so ahead of your times in doing that. Did you ever think that even influencers, for that matter, will become so big that every brand today, when it comes to marketing, cannot really dream of even leaving them out?
You know, I just think that actually Cosmo as a brand has just always been a little bit ahead of its time. Cosmo talked about sex, Cosmo talked about feminism, Cosmo about working women, and I think that it is just Cosmo's DNA to be a little bit more modern, perhaps. You know, when we launched Cosmo Blogger Awards, we just knew deep in our hearts that this was where things would be ultimately moving.
The event, put together by a power-packed women team led by Sakshi Kohli and Nandini Phalla, saw the biggest influencers of the country in attendance being recognized and
More power to them. Wow, it's so awesome to see people getting recognized for their hard work and their passion, and it was such a beautiful night.
We'd like to dedicate. No brand, marketeer today can really do without influencers. And one of the top designers in India, Rahul Mishra, echoed this fact.
I think best thing which I saw today, the kind of energy, the kind of support which in a way everybody had for each other. It's almost like a sense of great community which has got a lot of strength, but at the same time they understand their responsibility.
I am a mental health awareness influencer of the year.
A commendable addition this year was a rather responsible category of mental health awareness influencer of the year. Outside of fashion and beauty influencers, the award saw recognition for Climate Warrior of the Year, to Social Reform Activist of the Year, to Body Love Influencer of the Year, making it a smashing success when it comes to online content creation. Here's congratulating all the winners of the Cosmopolitan India Blogger Awards 21-22. In New Delhi, Chetty Narula for India Today.
Time now for a short break, but we'll be back soon. Stay tuned with us.
a huge disastrous scene over here. This is a city absolutely dead.
The Ukrainian military truck that was destroyed by our artillery.
Windows broken, shards of glass everywhere. These are unreal times for people of God. I'm atop a T-64 Russian tank, and they are now preparing to roll in.
My colleague Tushar Joshi caught up with the team of Sharma Ji Namkeen, the last film late actor Rishi Kapoor featured in. Paresh Rawal, who stepped into his shoes to complete the shoot, and Juhi Chawla remembered Rishi Kapoor, talked about their experience working with him and much more. Listen in.
मैं सोचा था कि एक चाट कॉर्नर खोला जाए। मेरी भतीजी, उसकी फ्रेंड के यहाँ पर सत्संग है, एक सॉलिड कुक चाहिए। पता है, कुकिंग इज एन आर्ट। शर्मा जी नमकीन बाकी सारे।
I want to start with Paresh ji and talk to you about the opening frame of the trailer, where we see you and Rishi ji wearing almost similar sweaters. And I couldn't help but notice Rishi ji's love for sweaters and the fact that he was known for his iconic sweaters throughout his career. Your thoughts on that?
मैंने पहली बात तो ये कि मैंने ट्रेलर देखा नहीं है। दूसरी बात ये कि स्वेटर की बात मत कीजिए मुझे, मैं कभी मुझसे बर्दाश्त नहीं होता था। हर सीन के अंदर मैं ये सोचता था कि ऋषि जी ने ये पहना ही क्यों, वो नहीं पहनते तो भी अच्छा ही होता था।
The reason being because it was very hot when we were shooting.
Yeah, when we started, because when they were shooting it was winter. हमने शुरू किया तो
समर हो
गया था। एंड तो मुझे कहानी बहुत ज़बरदस्त लगी है और ये मैं अपने आप को बड़ा ही सौभाग्यशाली समझता हूँ कि ऐसी कहानी के अंदर, ऐसी फिल्म के अंदर मुझे काम करने का मौका मिला और इस तरह से मिला कि एज एन एक्टर भी आपको मज़ा है, आप ट्रिब्यूट भी दे रहे इतने बेहतरीन आर्टिस्ट को, बेहतरीन इंसान भी मैं कहूँगा। So it was a kind of win-win situation for me.
Juhi, he made a very interesting point on Behtareen Insan. I mean, of course, we all know Rishi ji as a powerhouse performer. We can speak in volumes about that. But as a person, as a human being, you knew him very well, up close and personal. I want to sort of take you back in time to that space when you first met him. Like throwback, back in the day when you had your first encounter. What was the one thing that stayed with you after that meeting?
So I've known Chintu ji for years because I've seen him throughout my career. I can just tell you instances because it was the music launch of QSQT. Then I worked with him in one of my early films, Kalpataru ji ki koi film thi, uska naam main bhul rahi hu. And I
think मैं भी था उसमें।
हैं? सच्ची?
मैंने बहुत फिल्मों में काम किया।
घर की कहानी, वो ऐसे फैमिली ड्रामास बहुत बनाते थे। That time I was very, very new and I'm giving a shot with Chintu ji. Camera is on me. I am shaking in my knees because उनके सामने मैं अगर डायलॉग भूल गई तो मेरी तो मतलब I would want कि यार जमीन फट जाए, मैं अंदर चली जाऊँ। So I was so nervous and he was himself. He was like a star and effortless acting, first take okay. So all the more you get nervous कि भगवान मेरी मदद कर देना, ये shot ठीक कर देना किसी तरह।
Reggie, on a scale of 1 to 10, how good or bad a cook you are? Because in the film we see you sprinkle things and wrap things and try to cook things.
पानी बॉईल कर सकता हूँ। Nothing beyond that. But Chintu साहब का जो I was directed by him in his first directorial venture अपना आप लौट चले। तो जैसे मैं न्यू फर्स्ट डायरेक्टोरियल वेंचर अपना आप लौट चले। तो जैसे मैं न्यूयॉर्क 5th Street. You like Japanese? Go to Otabe on the 65th Street. You like catfish? Go to Virgil Grill. माने जो बड़ी जितनी भी रेस्टोरेंट है सबके नाम बता दिए. इधर जाना, ये खाना. So passionate about food. अरे amazing.
टाई शाई लगा के कहाँ से आ रहे हो आप? NGO गया और फोन तो साइलेंट पे था.
बज गया. पापा आपने मुझसे झूठ बोला.
नहीं रिंकू ऐसा नहीं है जैसे तू समझ रहा है.
पापा तो कैसा है यार? हम एक सोसाइटी में रहते हैं. आपको फर्क नहीं पड़ता, मुझे पड़ता है. हर चीज आपके हिसाब से नहीं होगी यार.
मैं जैसा हूँ वैसा हूँ. मुझे किसी से परमिशन लेने की जरूरत नहीं है.
जब तक कोई बिल न भरना हो किसी को मेरी याद नहीं आती. क्या फायदा है ऐसा फैमिली का?
उल्टी सीधी जैसी भी हो फैमिली है.
तो किसी का लोड मत ले पंडित. रब का नाम ले और चढ़ जा चौपर में.
Late actor Rishi Kapoor is one of the actors who couldn't see his film Sharma Ji Namkeen take its final shape. But now that it has made it to the OTT platform, we get you more details on that along with other posthumous Bollywood releases. Take a look.
Celebrities who left us for their heavenly abode have also left a void in the industry that can never be filled. While all the work that they have done over the years will live on forever, it is their last project after their demise that is dearly remembered by the fans, more so because the artists themselves couldn't see it take its final shape. Sushant Singh Rajput is one of the actors who passed away before his film Dil Bechara saw light of the day.
जन्म कब लेना है और मरना कब है हम डिसाइड नहीं कर सकते, पर कैसे जीना है वो हम डिसाइड कर सकते हैं. सनी किसी बात.
Released on digital platform on July 24, 2020, this was Sushant's last film that fans watched with teary eyes.
तुम्हारा इस तरह से इग्नोर करना won't change my feelings.
Dil Bechara was the Hindi remake of Hollywood film The Fault in Our Stars, based on the book with same title.
और मैं तुम्हारी गर्लफ्रेंड नहीं.
अभी नहीं है. कभी नहीं.
कभी नहीं.
Sushant played the role of Emmanuel Rajkumar Jr., aka Manny. Despite suffering from bone cancer, his character always was shown as optimistic and motivated to do something.
एक था राजा, एक थी रानी, दोनों मर गए, खत्म कहानी. पर ये कहानी अधूरी है. इसे पूरा वो राजा और रानी करते हैं.
Irfan Khan's last film, titled Murder at Teesri Manzil 302, released on OTT platform a year after his demise in 2020. In the film, he plays the character named Shekhar Sahayogi, aka Mr. Chan, an Indian handyman in Bangkok who helps out fellow Indians with their chores.
तुमने तो मुझे फांसी पे चढ़ाने का इंतजाम कर दिया यार. कहानी यहाँ खत्म नहीं होने दूंगा मैं.
Irfan passed away after fighting a long battle with cancer. Despite his health condition, he managed to complete the shoot of Angrezi Medium.
On top of me. Inside I am very emotional, and outside I am very happy for my bitia. बस आखिरी अंग्रेजी आ गया मैं.
One of the most loved actresses, Sridevi, appeared in Zero, which released in theatres months after her sudden demise in February 2018. Sridevi did a cameo in this SRK starrer, where she played herself in a party sequence. Rishi Kapoor was shooting for his film Sharma Ji Namkeen when he passed away due to leukemia. His unfinished parts were completed by Paresh Rawal, who stepped into his shoes to play the lovable 60-year-old the same year. He essayed the role of an orphanage caretaker in the film.
अगर इंसान के दिल में यकीन हो, तो वो चट्टान भी हिला सकता है.
तो मुझे और यकीन कहाँ मिलेगा? खूब सारा यकीन.
Viceroy's house, the Ghazi attack, Gul Makai and Om Prakash Zindabad are Om Puri's other posthumous films. Rajesh Khanna's last film, Riyasat, was released 2 years after his death in 2012. He played the role of Godfather Don Sahib, who protects his city from people with bad intentions. Like Rajesh Khanna, the 70s heartthrob Shami Kapoor also couldn't see his film take its final shape. Ranbir Kapoor's Rockstar was his last film, which released months after his death. He did a cameo and his character name was Ustad Jameel Khan.
ये बड़ा जानवर है, ये आपके छोटे पिंजरे में नहीं समाएगा, ये अपनी दुनिया बनाएगा।
मतलब ये लड़का उस्ताद जी ये
दूसरी चीज है डिंगरा, इस पर उसका हाथ है, उसकी इनायत है। हमने कह दिया ना डिंगरा साहब, इस पर लगा दीजिए, बहुत कमाएंगे।
Farooq Sheikh had not one, but 2 films which were released after his death in 2013. First was Yangistan, co-starring Jackie Bhagnani. He essayed the role of Akbar Patel, secretary to PM, who helps Jackie's character in the film.
हुजूर ये नाम तो बुजुर्गों ने रख दिया था, लेकिन आप मुझे किंग न समझे।
Second one was a war drama titled Children of War, in which he portrayed the role of Majid, a right-minded, well-to-do zamindar.
उन लोगों ने क्या इस्लाम ठेके पर ले रखा है? हाँ? या अल्लाह पर सिर्फ पाकिस्तान का हक है? हाँ?
Both his last films were released in 2014. Entertainment Bureau, India Today.
So that's all we could pack in the show today, but make sure you tune into In the Club, same time every day to catch all the latest from the showbiz world. Goodbye.
A NASA probe has left California aboard a SpaceX rocket to carry out a life-size experiment. The mission's objective is to collide with Dimorphos, an asteroid measuring 160 meters in diameter, located 11 million kilometers from Earth, in order to change its trajectory and avoid a potential collision. DART is expected to hit Dimorphos at a speed of 24,000 kilometers in the autumn of 2022 after a 10-month journey. The asteroid is a moon orbiting a larger asteroid called Didymos. Neither its composition nor its shape is known. The effects of the impact on Dimorphos will be observed by a small satellite that will be deployed a few days before. Scientists believe that none of the 27th.
You are watching India Today.
Shortage of food, water, medicine. Putin's top minister, Sergei Lavrov, meets unchanged today. Objections to the Sabarmati Ashram revamp plan. High Court had dismissed Tushar Gandhi's plea in November.
Angry Sri Lankans took to the streets in the capital, Colombo, protesting against the soaring prices of essentials and shortages of everything from food to fuel. The protesters were tear-gassed and showered with water cannons.
Very difficult for us to manage, as I need to always pump petrol to go to work.
Repay about $4 billion in debt in the rest of this year, including a $1 billion international Sri Lankans are raging. Massive demonstrations against the government's handling of the crisis were witnessed across the capital. Cops clashed with hundreds of protesters in Colombo after vandalism and arson by the protesters. Agitators set ablaze a bus in the capital city, forcing cops to resort to water cannon and tear gas.
People are not even eating 2 of the 3 meals a day. They just eat 1 meal. We don't know when these problems will end. Don't know at which point the country will take to the streets and rebel.
President Gotabaya Rajapaksa has chalked out a plan to work with IMF to end the crisis.
Yesterday's discussions with the International Monetary Fund was also held for this purpose. Through those discussions, we hope to find a way to pay off our annual loan installments, sovereign bonds, and so on. Subsequent to my discussions with the International Monetary Fund, I have decided to work with them after examining the advantages and disadvantages.
The Indian Ocean Island nation is battling a foreign exchange crisis that forced the devaluation of its currency and hit payments for essential imports such as food, medicine, and fuel. Bureau Report, India Today.
So while Sri Lanka facing this economic downturn, we're going to get into the economics and the politics of it in a short while. But I want to connect to 2 citizens that we are joined by from Sri Lanka to get an actual sense of what is the sense on ground. Rehan Jayavikram, former mayor, Weligama, joins us, as well as Indrajit Samarajiva. He is an author. Mr. Samarajiva, if I might start with you. You know, we connected earlier on over social media, and you actually told me you have to save on your battery pack to be able to make it to our show. How bad really is it? Because we are reading these horror stories where, you're out of food, you're out of medicine, you're out of power, you can't even go through elective surgery. How bad really is it?
So I'll start by, excuse me, I'll start by saying that I'm one of the lucky ones. We're actually quite rich, so we can adapt around it. But a lot of people are really suffering. But for us, the impact is, as you can hear from my voice, I'm sick, I'm sleep deprived, my children didn't sleep well last night, but we have food on the table and we're able to get by. But a lot of people are really not doing very well at all. I would say my experience last night, we just had a power cut all night, and so the children don't sleep. And then my son wakes up and just screams at me. And then I told my son another time that, the president's house has power. And then my son screamed at him. And I think that's the attitude everyone in this country has right now, young or old, because we're really suffering. And then we don't see our leaders being there with us. And we see them as, in fact, causing this problem.
Mr. Samarajiva, I want to ask you, there is so much being said about, the civil unrest. We can see it as we're speaking with you, on screen. How much is it actually organic, where there is this strong discontent, where now the first family of your country is concerned?
I would say it's very organic. I feel very angry. This affects everyone. This is not like a distant conflict, or it's not a distant problem. This affects everyone directly. Energy feeds into every part of our lives. We can't take our children to school. We can't keep food cold. We can't feed our children. We can't move. We can't run businesses. This affects every single person. There have been other problems which have affected certain communities or certainly poor people, but this is affecting everyone across all strata of life. Even wealthy people who live in apartment buildings, suddenly they don't have a generator operating, and then they have to climb up 20 floors. So they can't turn away from this problem. Minorities and the poor have always been telling us that these problems have been happening, but this is a problem which affects everyone. And I'd say the tension is very strong in Sri Lanka right now. I'm very angry. Everyone I know is very angry. This is hurting us directly. Our children are crying.
Can you give us a sense of what you're seeing on the streets, Indrajit?
So the president's house is a kilometer from mine. So just down the street in the other direction, people have been holding silent, peaceful protests, not silent, but peaceful protests for 31 days now. All of the major political parties have come out and protested peacefully. Even the protest at the president's house, look, I understand that, and my son understands that. Why are his lights on when ours are off? So it's good that people went there. And then they talk about, look, the violence really came from the police side. They used water cannons. They used tear gas. They put 40 of us in cages. We didn't put any of them in cages. So, this is all violence being done to us. Even these daily acts of deprivation are violence done to us. So I think people have been remarkably peaceful. But that said, how much can we take? It's a lot of pressure. Like, this affects us just on a very human level. We're not sleeping enough. We're not eating well. We're not able to like work and live and move. So it's a lot of tension in the city or in the country. It's not just Colombo. Like I said, this is affecting everyone. I would say that it's not like riots in the street. Sri Lanka's safe and we've been through problems before. But look, I think right now we're at the point where, a single spark could turn into a flame. I do think that.
Mr. Samarajiva, I know you're short on power. I'm going to ask you one quick question before I let you go and conserve on that little battery and not waste your time when we go across to other
So actually, I came to my mother-in-law's house where she has a generator. I've been avoiding this for a while, but we finally came in.
All right, I'm going to ask you one very quick question before I let you go. Do you see things getting worse, and how worse is it? Because like I said, we are reading these horror stories where surgery cannot take place in hospitals. Is that actually happening? Are you completely out of medicine? Is it actually happening on ground?
So I think at the University of Perideni, I think it was, yes, they did report that they were stopping surgeries. But your foreign minister was in the country at that time, and he actually helped intervene and get supplies for that, which we're very grateful for. Sri Lanka's hope is essentially that it rains, and it did rain today. Because we have developed our own hydropower energy, and we're of course an ancient agricultural irrigation civilization, and we developed that. But the problem is now we're depending on oil imports for the rest of our power. But if it rains, then we do have some power from that. And then going forward, that is what we really have to focus on. We have to develop our own energy resources, our own production capabilities.
All right, but clearly you don't have any faith in your government right now, at least what we are witnessing and what you are
No, they got to go. I think the government can't provide power. They don't get to be in power. I'm sorry, that's just the basics.
Well, Indrajit Samarajiva, appreciate you joining us. I hope we don't have to connect with you in the next few days, and you do, and things actually turn for the better. I wish your son a good sleep this evening. I hope it rains. I hope it pours. Thank you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you to the people of India. You've actually been very supportive. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that comment. Thank you. I want to now cut across to Rehan Jayavikram. He's the former mayor of Welagama. He's also joining us. Mr. Jayavikram, you do have political connections. We understand that. But what is it that you are actually witnessing right now on the streets of Sri Lanka? Because what we are seeing is highly disturbing.
I think it's astounding scenes, what we're all seeing. And first of all, thank you very much for inviting us to be a part of this show. It's astounding what we're seeing on live television. There are organic protests which are not carried out by any political party. One such group infiltrated the president's residence yesterday, or the access road to his residence. They were treated rather cruelly. They were treated rather unfairly. There was a government orchestrated event, I would say, where one of the buses or one of the vehicles in the protest was set on fire. And that was blamed on the protesters as well. And there are certain videos that have come out which show, certain misdeeds being done by certain government supporters. And it's come to a point where the people really can't take it anymore. Because every single thing and every single, what would you say, essential in this country has gone up, starting from the milk powder, which has significantly increased, the gas, there's a severe gas shortage, and even if there is gas, it's almost double or triple the price. There's a severe shortage of diesel, petrol, and fuel in general. There's a massive shortage in kerosene oil. And it's just turning out to be a disaster.
Mr. Jayavikram, it seems to be, with what you're facing right now, the biggest leveler. Because even if you have the wealth or the money, the shortage is so acute that you cannot access basic necessities as well.
Absolutely. And the fact that as a main opposition, the fact that we have been telling the government for over a year to go to the IMF, because there have been case studies all over the world. Now, if you look at the situation in Lebanon, and when you look at what's happening in Sri Lanka, it's very much like a parallel universe where it's almost the exact same thing which is happening. So there were prior warnings. And this has been happening in countries like Lebanon since 2018 or 2019. So we had ample time to do case studies. And the fact that the government refused to go to the IMF for over a period of 1 year, it's just shocking. And they just kept on printing money because of the president's lackluster attitude and the massive tax cuts that this government brought on its people. He brought in tax cuts with the hope that, this ruling party will be able to win elections, but that resulted in massive foreign debt and the fact that we can't service these loans and we're almost heading into default. So I think the government knew that this was happening. I really don't know why they didn't take any action, but it's time for them to go home now.
Mr. Jaivikram, I'll ask you one final question. For somebody, I want to get a larger understanding for our viewers. As a common citizen, how did you see the trajectory of this downturn? Because, with a lot of us, it's at least, we are your neighbor. It's hit us in the face where suddenly we see that your country has completely run out of fuel. Completely, there's a power crisis. It's all shut down. Can you give us a trajectory for a common citizen? Has it only amplified in the last few days, or was it slowly coming? The storm was building.
It definitely didn't amplify within the last few days. It's been coming for a year. And it's not just the main opposition, but various people, economists, even people like Indi Samarajiva, whom you had on the show. All these guys have been telling the government for about a year or about a year and a half that we need to seriously think of restructuring our debt program and going to the IMF. And like I said, the government knew this was coming. And we are very grateful because there were two major problems that happened the other day. One was the serious lack of fuel, and I think your foreign minister visited the IOC, the Indian oil company fuel shed, one of the fuel sheds, and he promised some sort of relief. And when Peradeniya, the teaching hospital, ran out of essential medical items, where they basically put a halt to all surgeries that were not procedural surgeries, which included emergency procedures like people who are elected to get heart surgeries or liver transplants or kidney transplants and all these very important things. They had put a sudden stop, and not a single minister in this government came forward and spoke about this. And it was only the Indian foreign minister who issued a statement about it. So that just shows the severity of how one-sided and how blatantly this government shows a lack of empathy towards its own people, where the Indian foreign minister has to intervene before any of our ministers intervene.
All right, Mr. Jaivikram, appreciate you joining us. Thank you. Once again, we hope that, things pipe down early and, the country's on a better path sooner than later. Appreciate you joining us, sir. Thank you there. Meanwhile, while India has come up to help Sri Lanka, and that's something that is echoed through these two conversations that we've had as well. What about China? Because clearly, for China, Sri Lanka is a very keen business interest. There has been a lot of talk, viewers, about no aid from China as Sri Lanka battles its worst economic crisis so far. But is Xi Jinping's administration being questioned? Let's tell you about China's debt trap on the island nation. Now, Colombo's debt repayment to Beijing amounted to nearly $2 billion. This is not all. China also accounts for a whopping 30% of Lanka's FDI. Chinese government has also invested $12 billion in Lankan infrastructures. Beijing is also developing special economic zones in the country. China gave $1.1 billion loan for giving Humban Tota on lease for 90 years. China harboring engineering company is also building Colombo Port City project. This is not all. Beijing is also building 3.9 billion oil refinery near the capital of Colombo. One would think that despite so much of investment, why has China completely shied off helping their business partners, what they call it, at a time of acute crisis, acute need? Let's cut across to our guest this evening. I have Harsha De Silva. He is member of the Parliament, Sri Lanka. I have Skand Tayal, former diplomat. I have Anand Srinivasan, economist. I want to, with the permission of our other guests, I want to cut across to Mr. De Silva first. Mr. De Silva, a lot of talk. You come from the opposition party right now. There is a lot of talk, and it is being alleged that it is your party that is trying very hard to foment civil unrest through these protests, which are being pushed as possibly organic, but are political in nature.
As a matter of fact, the protests that are happening now have not been instigated by us, but by civil society groups. They have been organizing these protests on WhatsApp and Telegram groups, and they are coming together. These are middle-class people, they are students, they are housewives, they are professionals. And it started about 2 weeks ago with people holding candles along the main roads, but it has now become a much bigger force. People are gathering, and it's pretty much getting out of control. And of course, the opposition is trying to keep it civil and without violence. And even though we are not organizing it, they have our absolute support. Because as an opposition, we are supposed to have people bring the problems to the government and tell them to resolve the problems
but Mr.
they
De Silva,
created for the
how
people.
tacit is the support given by your party, SJP? Because, you know, your own Facebook page where the SJB asked people to come out in large numbers and challenge the government and the president.
Well, those are individual MPs who've done that, but we've issued a statement saying that the party has nothing to do with any of these protests, but we are certainly supportive of the protests.
Mr. De Silva, what, according to your party, is the reason that has led to this crippling economic downturn of your country?
Absolute mismanagement of the economy, not understanding how to resolve problems, and just absolute, I think, what's the word I'm looking for? Selfishness and thinking that they know how to handle a situation when they actually don't. So incompetence and callous disregard for professional advice.
You know, also what is being talked about, not just in India, but as well in Sri Lanka as well, for a country like China, which has such huge business interests in your very country.
Actually, they haven't pumped in so much money to relieve us of our debt. It has been India who's been helpful to us in this last by postponing payments due through the Asian Clearing Union. And the Indian Foreign Minister, Dr. Jaishankar, was here just a couple of days ago. And he apparently has said, okay, they will support us even more. And certainly they are supporting the people of Sri Lanka, not the government.
You know, I'll ask you one quick final question, Mr. De Silva. You know, the fact is that you said that China has not done more. Why do you think China is not doing more? Is it to further entrench your country into a debt trap, which at least many economists are looking at in terms of just by the sheer way of investment?
I cannot say China hasn't helped. What I'm saying is China has not been as forthcoming as India in the last few weeks when we have fallen to these depths. They have said, look, we are not able to restructure our debt, but we will reschedule them in such a way that we will give you more money to pay back our loans, but we have to make sure that you pay our loans on time. So that's the reality here.
All right, Mr. De Silva, appreciate you joining us. Mr. De Silva, an MP of the SJP, the primary opposition in Sri Lanka, speaking with us. I want to now cut across, and we're going to cut across to our guests in just about 2 minutes, but get you this report from Sri Lanka, where thousands of farmers in Sri Lanka are protesting against the continuing economic from Sri Lanka, where thousands of farmers in Sri Lanka are protesting against the continuing economic downturn, which has now brought shortage of food, fuel and medicine. This rally was organized by the National People's Power Opposition Alliance, which accused the government of mismanaging the economy and
Dule Dharmatilaka is worried. The farmer from Polonnaruwa in north-central Sri Lanka says the yield from his paddy field has dropped by nearly half. With debts to pay and costs rising every day, he says farmers are struggling.
We have already pawned our tractors, our spraying machines, our wives' jewellery. Even their wedding rings have been pawned. Home rice cookers and sewing machines have all been borrowed against.
Dharmatilaka and thousands like him across the country blame President Gotabaya Rajapaksa's decision last year to ban chemical fertilizer, pesticides and weedicides for the lower yields. Officers from the Statistics Department are assessing how much of the harvest has been affected. One agriculture source told Al Jazeera yields have fallen by 40 to 50% because of the fertilizer ban. The president said the measure was aimed at making Sri Lankans healthier and switching to 100% organic agriculture. But it was removed 6 months later after widespread protests. Dharmatilaka says the idea was a good one, but the way it was quickly implemented was wrong. Farmers say they were not consulted about the move and are angry at a short-sighted experiment they say has cost them dearly.
We never thought this would happen in Polonnaruwa, which was so self-sufficient. What we want is to chase this government out.
Because of this injustice that I came here today. The politicians who ruled from 1977 must take responsibility for this crisis. They are the ones who dragged our country into this situation.
The anger brought thousands of protesters, including Dharmatilaka, to Polonnaruwa in the North Central province.
The government, especially the president, he clearly emphasized that this plan was made in order to establish organic farming system in Sri Lanka. But that is not the reason. So the government did not have enough dollars to bring down fertilizers from overseas. So because of that, this problem was created and the farmers are battered. They are battered to the core.
Most farmers told Al Jazeera they rely on their harvest to clear debts and build a stock of rice for their own use and money to last them through till the next harvest. But let alone settling debts, they now fear not having enough food for their families. Minister of Agriculture Mahinda Ananda Alutgamage has announced the government will spend $200 million to help the farmers. But the farmers who are yet to receive the payout say the rates do not cover their losses. Protests against the government's inability to control rising prices and address shortages of essential goods have been increasing in recent months. The farming community has been growing rice in these areas for hundreds of years and say if the government cannot address the current crisis, it must resign. Mina Fernandez, Al Jazeera, Colombo.
Well, then, other than its huge...
Resign. Mina Fernandez, Al Jazeera, Colombo.
Well, then, other than its huge debt obligations, one of the other reasons that's touted to be where Sri Lanka finds itself, especially in acute food shortage, is changing its agrarian policy. Let's cut across right now to our guest. I have Mr. Thayal, former diplomat, and Anand Srinivasan, economist. Mr. Srinivasan, the fact that Sri Lanka switched its agrarian policy to a more organic one of the reasons as well for the downturn?
Definitely, because there were three big reasons for the downfall of the Sri Lankan economy. One was, of course, what the farmer described, that they switched to a organic farming, hoping that they would capture world markets for their organic products. It completely fell flat on their face and their production dropped by 40%. A lot of people have been warning the Sri Lankan government about this, and in spite of that, Gotabaya Rajapaksa took this decision of going organic and staying with it for 6 months. It is going to take years for Sri Lanka to recover from this problem. Even basic necessities like rice, sugar have now to be imported. Already Sri Lanka was a net importing nation. More than this, Sri Lanka's major export is tea, and tea production has dropped. Tea production has dropped by 50%, and therefore their foreign exchange, which would have come through tea exports, has vanished. And because they don't have foreign exchange, they have not been able to service their debt. So this organic farming is directly responsible for fall of tea exports. Also, COVID made sure that there would be no tourists in Sri Lanka. These are the two major foreign exchange earners of Sri Lanka. So you don't have tourists, you don't have tea exports for 2 years, and this is what happened. At the same time, you had used the cutback on production of food, which had to be imported in more quantity. Therefore, they don't have enough foreign exchange to meet their import covers. And this is the crisis that Sri Lanka faces today.
You know, as we're going to pull out those graphics that we were showing our viewers on, the kind of investments that China has made in Sri Lanka, and I want to bring in and appreciate the patience, sir. Mr. Thayil, he's a former diplomat. At this point of time, where Sri Lanka is also admitting to a fact that India is doing a lot more than possibly, somebody like a China is. Should India see this as an opportunity to make those amends?
First, Sri Lanka is a friend, it's a neighbor. It's very painful for any Indian to see the kind of hardships which are being faced by the people of Sri Lanka. And naturally, government of India, people of India will try to do whatever they can to mitigate these hardships. And that is what is being done, has been done. $2.5 billion worth of assistance already given, $1 billion line of credit. I think some diesel is being sent at a very emergency basis. Foreign Minister Mr. Jaishankar was there and he personally saw the kind of difficulties people are facing. So whatever India can do, that is being done. And yes, it is, when we say neighborhood first policy, sometimes some neighbors have had some misunderstandings, some grievances against India. And it is for India, people of India, to be always magnanimous and try to help the neighboring countries and not really delving into that how they had behaved or what some policy decisions they might have taken or some action they might have taken which may not have been to our liking. So I think this is India's role. We are the biggest country in South Asia. And this is what is being done.
But Mr. Thayil, I want to ask you, the fact is, how worried should actually India be? Because the kind of investment one sees of China, in Sri Lanka is very worrying, for especially the proximity that Sri Lanka has with us. And this could very well, it's a time of acute crisis for Sri Lanka, and to talk about it in a very plain, simple terms, but it's also an opportunity for India to possibly, and we are doing it. The fact that we had a foreign minister there, we are sending them, stuff which they need desperately, is an opportunity for India to actually, fill in that role, which possibly China could take.
India has its own strengths, its own attitude, its own empathy. And China is more business-like. China, even BRI, when they talk about $50, $40 billion or more, or